I'll do anything. In bed, in the shower, day or night, I'll do anything. The words came from behind a closed door at midnight, spoken by the one woman who never begged for anything. Elena Vaughn, billionaire CEO, ice queen, untouchable. And Adrian Cross, the man who'd spent 3 years watching her command empires, froze in that hallway, his heart slamming against his ribs. Because those weren't the words of the woman the world knew. They were the sound of something breaking. If you want to know what happens when two people stop hiding, hit that like button, drop a comment with your city, and stay until the end. This story goes places you won't expect. The fluorescent lights in the 42nd floor hallway buzzed like dying insects. Adrian Cross stood with his hand on the elevator button, briefcase in one hand, the other rubbing at eyes that hadn't seen proper sleep in weeks. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday, which meant most of Manhattan was either drunk, asleep, or making regrettable decisions on dating apps. He was here because Elena Vaughn didn't believe in normal business hours. 3 years. That's how long he'd been her executive assistant, though the title felt like a joke considering what the job actually required. Adrian wasn't filing papers and answering phones. He was running interference with board members who thought a 30-year-old woman had no business running a company worth $800 million. He was rearranging her entire calendar when she got one of her feelings about a deal. He was the person who made sure she ate something besides black coffee and whatever protein bar she could grab between meetings. And he was very, very good at pretending he didn't notice how her voice softened when she said his name, or how she'd started leaving post-it notes on his desk with terrible jokes that only the two of them would understand. Adrian pushed the elevator button again, harder this time, like that would make the damn thing move faster. His daughter Mia was with his mother tonight, which gave him exactly 0 excuses to leave early. Not that Elena would notice if he did. She was probably 3 knuckles deep in some contract negotiation, her reading glasses perched on her nose in that way that made her look almost... The elevator dinged. Finally. He stepped inside and jabbed the button for the parking garage. The doors started to close, smooth and mechanical, when he heard it. A voice. Quiet. Strained. Coming from down the hall. Adrian's hand shot out, stopping the doors. He stood there, half in the elevator, half out, listening. I understand. Yes, I can do that. Elena's voice. He'd know it anywhere, that particular blend of authority and exhaustion she carried like a second skin. But there was something else threaded through it now, something that made his stomach drop. In bed, in the shower, day or night, I'll do anything, anything you need. The words hit him like a fist. Adrian stepped back into the hallway, letting the elevator doors close behind him. His feet moved before his brain caught up, carrying him toward Elena's office. The door was closed, a slim line of light visible underneath. Her shadow moved behind the frosted glass. He shouldn't be listening. He knew that. This was a private conversation, and Elena Vaughn was the most private person he'd ever met. In 3 years, she'd never mentioned family, never talked about her life outside these walls. He'd learned more about her from Google than from actual conversation. But those words, they didn't sound like negotiation. They didn't sound like the woman who'd once made a senior partner cry during a board meeting. They sounded like surrender. I'll prove it, Elena said, and something in her voice cracked. I'll prove I can be what she needs. Just, please, don't take her away from me. Adrian's hand was on the door handle before he realized it. He froze, his reflection staring back at him from the frosted glass. Tall, lean, tie loosened, and top button undone because he'd given up on professional appearances around hour 14. Dark hair that needed a cut, eyes that looked older than 32. He should leave. Walk away. Pretend he'd heard nothing. Instead, he knocked. The silence that followed was so complete he could hear his own heartbeat. Then footsteps, quick and light, and the door opened. Elena Vaughn stood there in the kind of suit that cost more than his monthly rent, her dark hair still perfectly smooth despite the late hour. But her eyes, those sharp, calculating eyes that missed nothing, were red-rimmed. Her mascara had smudged slightly at the corners. She'd been crying. Adrian. His name came out flat, carefully controlled. I thought you left. Forgot my... He trailed off, realizing he had no excuse. His briefcase was in his hand. Everything else was already in his car. I heard you talking. Something flickered across her face. Fear, maybe. Or anger. With Elena, it was hard to tell. She stepped back slightly, her hand still on the door like she might close it in his face. "It's late," she said. "You should go home to Mia." She remembered. Of course she did. Elena Vaughn remembered everything. Client birthdays, meeting notes from 6 months ago, the fact that Adrian's 4-year-old daughter was named after her grandmother and loved dinosaurs more than any human being should. "Mia's with my mom tonight." Adrian didn't move from the doorway. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." "Elena." She flinched, just slightly, barely visible, but he caught it. And that's when he knew something was seriously wrong, because Elena Vaughn didn't flinch. She didn't break. She was the woman who'd built her father's failing company into an empire while half the board tried to force her out. She was the person who gave presentations to rooms full of men twice her age and made them feel like children. She didn't cry, she didn't beg, but she had. "Who are you talking to?" Adrian asked quietly. "That's not—" She stopped, jaw tight. "It's personal. I gathered that." They stood there, the space between them charged with everything they'd spent 3 years not saying. The hallway lights buzzed. Somewhere in the building, a janitor's cart rattled. Elena closed her eyes. When she opened them again, something had shifted. The armor had cracked, just enough. "Come inside," she said. "If you're going to stand there judging me, at least do it somewhere less public." Adrian followed her into the office, and she closed the door behind them with a soft click that sounded far too final. Check. Elena's office was exactly what you'd expect from someone who ran a multi-million-dollar company. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, minimalist furniture that probably cost more than Adrian's car, abstract art that he suspected was original despite looking like someone had sneezed paint onto canvas. But there were things that didn't fit the image. A child's drawing taped to the wall behind her desk. Crayon flowers and a stick figure with long dark hair that looked like Elena. A coffee mug that said, "World's Okayest Aunt," sitting next to her laptop. And on her desk, partially hidden under a stack of contracts, a photo of a little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, with gap-toothed smile and Elena's same dark eyes. Adrian had never seen that photo before. Elena walked to her desk but didn't sit. Instead, she stood with her arms crossed, defensive and exhausted, and something else he couldn't quite name. "Her name is Sophie," she said, following his gaze to the photo. "My niece." "I didn't know you had a niece. Most people don't." Elena's fingers drummed against her arm, a nervous habit he'd only seen a handful of times. "My sister Claire died 8 months ago. Car accident. She was a single mother, no other family except me. So now Sophie is—" She trailed off, but Adrian could fill in the blanks. "You're taking care of her," he said. "Trying to." Elena laughed, but it had no humor in it. "The state doesn't think I'm fit. Too much work. Not enough stability. They're threatening to place her in foster care unless I can prove I'm capable of being a real parent instead of—" She gestured vaguely at the office. "This." Adrian's mind was racing, pieces clicking together. The late nights that had gotten even later in recent months. The times he'd caught her on the phone, voice soft and patient, in a way he'd never heard before. The day she'd snapped at a board member for suggesting they schedule a meeting at 6 p.m., saying she had prior commitments without explanation. "The person on the phone," he said. "The caseworker?" Elena nodded. "She wants to do a home visit, wants to see that Sophie has stability, routine, someone who's actually present in her life. And I told her," her voice caught. "I told her I would do anything, be anywhere, whatever it takes. In bed, in the shower, day or night." Adrian repeated quietly. "It sounds worse when you say it like that." Elena turned away from him, facing the window. The city glittered below them, millions of lights in millions of windows, each one hiding its own secrets. "I meant I'd be there for her. Morning routine, bedtime, bath time, all of it. But yes, I'm aware it sounded like I was offering something very different." Adrian should probably be uncomfortable. This was too personal, too raw. He'd spent 3 years maintaining professional distance, staying in his lane. But standing here, watching Elena's shoulders curve forward like she was trying to make herself smaller, all he wanted to do was close the space between them. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. "Why would I?" Elena's reflection in the window met his eyes. You work for me, Adrian. This isn't your problem. Is that what you think? That I'm just... He stopped, frustration building.
I've watched you run yourself into the ground for 3 years. I've seen you skip meals and sleep at your desk and work through holidays. And you never asked for help. Not once. I don't need help. Bullshit. The word came out harsher than he'd intended, but Elena didn't even blink. She just kept staring at that endless city, her reflection perfectly composed except for the slight tremble in her jaw. You can't do this alone, Adrian said, softer now. No one can. I have to. Elena's hands curled into fists at her sides. Because if I don't, they'll take her. They'll put her in some system where she's just a case number, bouncing between homes, and she's already lost so much. Her voice broke completely, just cracked right down the middle like glass. Adrian moved without thinking. 3 steps brought him close enough to see the tears she was fighting, the way her breathing had gone shallow and quick. Elena, he said. She shook her head, furious with herself.
I don't do this. I don't fall apart. Maybe you should. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his hand found her shoulder. Just this once. For a long moment, nothing happened. Elena stood rigid under his touch, every muscle locked tight. Then something inside her gave way, and she turned. She didn't collapse against him like in movies. There was no dramatic sobbing. Elena Vaughn crying was quiet and controlled and somehow more devastating because of it. She pressed her forehead against his shoulder, and Adrian felt the slight hitch of her breath, the way her fingers gripped the front of his shirt like he might disappear. He wrapped his arms around her and held on. They stood like that while the city hummed below them and the office lights cast long shadows across the floor. Adrian's mind was chaos, 3 years of careful distance evaporating in seconds, replaced by the weight of her against him and the smell of her perfume and the realization that he'd been lying to himself for so damn long. Because this wasn't just concern for a boss. It wasn't just professionalism. He was in love with her. Had been, maybe, since the day she'd looked at him during his interview and said, I don't need someone to fetch my coffee, Mr. Cross. I need someone who can think 3 steps ahead and won't waste my time asking stupid questions. Can you do that? He'd said yes. And he'd spent 3 years proving it, watching her from a careful distance, keeping his feelings locked down tight because people like him, single dads with secrets and too much baggage, didn't get to have people like Elena Vaughn. Except here she was, crying into his shoulder, trusting him with the mess. I paid for your mother's treatment, Elena said suddenly, her voice muffled against his shirt. Adrian went still. What? She pulled back slightly, not quite meeting his eyes. Her mascara had smudged more, leaving dark traces on her cheeks. Last year, when she needed surgery and your insurance wouldn't cover it, the hospital bill that mysteriously disappeared, that was me. The ground seemed to tilt. Adrian had spent months trying to figure out what happened, how a $60,000 medical bill had just vanished from the system. The hospital claimed it was processed by an anonymous benefactor. He'd assumed it was some kind of charitable program, maybe a clerical error they'd never caught. Why? He managed. Because you were working 3 jobs to try to pay for it. Elena's eyes finally met his, dark and fierce and still wet with tears. You were here until midnight, then doing freelance consulting until 3 a.m., then driving for that rideshare service on weekends. And Mia, you barely saw her. I watched you destroy yourself trying to save your mother, and I... She stopped, swallowed. I couldn't just stand by. You could have told me. You would have refused, or worse, you would have felt obligated to me. Elena stepped back, putting distance between them. I didn't want that. I just wanted you to... To what? To stay. The word came out barely above a whisper. Everyone leaves eventually, but you stayed. Even when things got hard, even when I was impossible to work with, you stayed. And I needed... She trailed off, shaking her head. It doesn't matter. It matters, Adrian said. They looked at each other across 3 feet of expensive carpet, and the air felt electric, dangerous. Like one wrong word could tip everything into territory they couldn't walk back from. Adrian's phone buzzed in his pocket, shattering the moment. He pulled it out, expecting a message from his mother. Instead, it was a news alert. Vaughn Industries under fire, board questions. CEO's leadership amid personal struggles.
He looked up. Elena's expression said she'd already seen it. "They're circling," she said flatly. "Marcus Whitmore leaked something to the press about my divided attention, probably hoping to force a vote of no confidence. Can he do that?" "He can try." Elena walked to her desk, transformation happening in real time. Shoulders straightening, jaw setting, the armor sliding back into place piece by piece. "The board meets Monday. If I can't prove I'm stable, focused, capable of handling both the company and Sophie, you'll lose everything." "Yes." Adrian's mind was already working through scenarios, options, plans. It's what he did best, seeing 3 steps ahead, finding solutions before problems fully formed. "The home visit," he said.
"When is it?" "Saturday, 2 days." Elena's laugh was bitter. "I have 48 hours to become a perfect parent and convince a caseworker that my life isn't complete chaos, which would be difficult even without the company imploding." "What if you weren't alone?" She frowned. "What?" "The caseworker wants to see stability, right? Someone present in Sophie's life, helping with routine, providing support." Adrian could see it forming, the shape of something that might actually work. What if I helped? "Adrian, you have your own daughter to take care of. Who would love having a friend to play with?" He was talking faster now, conviction building. "My mom can watch both of them. You said Sophie's 7, Mia's 4, but she's good with older kids, and I can—" He stopped, really thinking about what he was offering. "I can be there. For the home visit, for the caseworker, I can show them you're not doing this alone." Elena stared at him. "You would do that? Risk your job, your reputation, just to—" "Help you? Yes." Adrian met her eyes. "You saved my mother's life. The least I can do is help you keep your family together." Something shifted in her expression. Hope, maybe, or fear. With Elena, they often looked the same. "It's not just about the caseworker," she said quietly. "If we do this, if you're involved, people will talk. The board, the press, everyone. They'll assume things. Let them." "Adrian, I mean it." He took a step closer. "I've spent 3 years watching you carry everything alone. If helping you means dealing with gossip or board politics or whatever else comes, I can handle it." "Why?" The question came out raw, unguarded. "Why would you do this for me?" "Because I love you," he thought. "Because I've loved you since the first time you smiled at one of my terrible jokes and pretended not to. Because watching you hurt is worse than any risk to my career." But what he said was, "Because it's the right thing to do. And because—" He hesitated. "You're not just my boss, Elena. You're my friend. And friends show up." Her eyes searched his face, looking for the lie. When she didn't find it, something in her cracked open a little wider. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." They spent the next 2 hours planning. Elena explained the situation with Sophie in more detail. How the little girl was struggling with grief, acting out in school, having nightmares. How the caseworker, a woman named Mrs. Patterson, had concerns about Elena's work schedule and emotional availability. "She thinks I'm too cold," Elena said, sorting through papers on her desk. "Too focused on business to properly care for a traumatized child." "Are you?" Adrian asked. She looked up sharply. "Excuse me?" "Too focused on business." He held her gaze. "Because from where I'm sitting, you're terrified of failing her. That's not cold. That's caring so much you're paralyzed by it." Elena's hand stilled on the papers. "I don't know how to be what she needs. I don't know how to—" She gestured vaguely. "I run companies. I negotiate deals. I don't do feelings and bedtime stories and emotional support. You're doing it right now." "What?" "Feelings." Adrian leaned against her desk. "You think breaking down in front of me wasn't emotional? You think admitting you're scared isn't vulnerable? Elena, you're already doing the hard part. The rest is just showing up." "Just showing up," she repeated like the words were foreign. "You make it sound simple." "It is simple. Not easy, but simple." He thought about Mia, about the nights when he'd had no idea what he was doing, when single parenthood felt like drowning in slow motion. Kids don't need perfect. They just need present. Elena absorbed this, turning it over in her mind. Then she pulled out her phone and showed him a text message. "Sophie, Can I stay at Emma's house again tonight, please? She's been doing this more, Elena said quietly. Asking to stay with friends, avoiding coming home. I think she's afraid I'll disappear like her mother did, or that She stopped. That I'll fail her somehow. When's the last time you did something with her? Just the two of you? Nothing work-related? Elena thought about it. The silence stretched. Exactly, Adrian said. So Saturday, before the caseworker comes, we change that. You and Sophie spend the morning together. Do something fun, something that has nothing to do with proving anything. Just be her aunt. And you'll be there? For the home visit? I'll be there. They talked through logistics, timing, what Mrs. Patterson would likely ask. Elena showed him photos of Sophie, a serious-faced kid with Elena's eyes and a stubborn set to her jaw. In one picture, she was holding a massive book about marine biology, looking at the camera like it was interrupting something important. She wants to be a marine biologist, Elena said, something soft in her voice. Specifically, she wants to study deep-sea creatures, things that live where the pressure would crush most living things. Adrian studied the photo. She sounds like someone else I know. Don't. But Elena was almost smiling. She's better than me, braver. She needs stability, routine, someone who won't leave. Then that's what we give her. It was nearly 2 a.m. when Adrian finally left. Elena walked him to the elevator, and they stood in that fluorescent hallway again, the space where everything had shifted. Thank you, she said. For this. For... She gestured vaguely. Not running away when you heard me falling apart. Everyone falls apart sometimes. Adrian pressed the elevator button. The trick is having someone there to help pick up the pieces. The elevator arrived with a soft ding. He stepped inside, then turned back. Elena? Yes? For what it's worth, I think you're going to be a great parent. You already are. She didn't respond, but something in her expression shifted, softened. And as the elevator doors closed, Adrian caught a glimpse of her reflection in the polished metal, a woman who'd spent so long being strong that she'd forgotten how to accept help. Until now. Friday passed in a blur of crisis management. The press had latched onto the story about Elena's divided focus, spinning narratives about distracted leadership and company instability. Marcus Whitmore was quoted extensively, raising concerns about fiduciary responsibility and shareholder interests. Adrian fielded 17 calls from board members, rearranged Elena's entire schedule, and killed 3 separate attempts by journalists to ambush her in the parking garage. It was chaos. But every few hours, Elena would catch his eye across the office and mouth, "Thank you," and somehow that made the chaos bearable. At 6 p.m., she left early, the first time Adrian had ever seen her leave before dark. She was picking up Sophie from school, taking her to dinner, building bridges before the caseworker arrived. Adrian stayed until 8, handling the last of the day's fires. When he finally got home, Mia was already asleep, curled up with her stuffed triceratops. His mother met him in the kitchen with raised eyebrows. "Long day?" she asked. "You have no idea." Adrian collapsed into a chair. "How would you feel about watching 2 kids tomorrow? Mia and a little girl named Sophie." His mother's expression shifted to something knowing. "This wouldn't have anything to do with your boss, would it?" "Mom, I'm not judging, sweetheart. I'm just saying, you've been alone a long time. If Elena Vaughn makes you smile like that, who am I to complain?" "It's not like that. She needs help with her niece, that's all." "Mm-hmm." His mother patted his shoulder. "Keep telling yourself that. And yes, I'll watch the girls. Bring Sophie by around 10. Adrian went to bed that night with his mind spinning through scenarios, backup plans, everything that could go wrong. But underneath the anxiety was something else. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. Saturday morning arrived with clouds and the threat of rain. Adrian picked up Sophie from Elena's apartment at 9 a.m., and the little girl who answered the door looked nothing like her photos. She was smaller than he'd expected, drowning in an oversized sweatshirt with a shark on it. Her dark hair was tangled, and she had purple circles under her eyes, like she hadn't been sleeping. But it was her expression that got him, this carefully blank look, like she'd learned not to show what she was feeling. "You're Adrian," she said. Not a question. "I am. And you're Sophie,"
Annalena says you're helping with the caseworker lady. Sophie's eyes were sharp, assessing. She says you're nice. Are you actually nice, or is that just what adults say? Adrian crouched down to her level. Depends on the day. Today I'm going to try very hard to be nice. But if I mess up, you should absolutely call me on it. The corner of Sophie's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Elena appeared behind her, and Adrian's breath caught. She was in jeans, actual jeans, not the designer business casuals she sometimes wore on weekends. Her hair was down. She looked younger, softer, and completely terrified. "Hi," she said. "Hi yourself." Adrian stood. "Ready for this?" "Absolutely not." But Elena's hand found Sophie's shoulder, gentle and protective.
But we're doing it anyway.
They went to the aquarium. Sophie's choice, apparently. She spent 3 hours pressed against glass tanks, narrating facts about cephalopods and bioluminescence and deep-sea thermal vents with the kind of intensity most people reserve for religion. Elena followed behind her, asking questions, taking photos, looking at her niece like she was seeing her clearly for the first time. Adrian trailed them both, watching the dynamic shift and settle. The way Elena learned to read Sophie's moods, backing off when the kid needed space, moving closer when she seemed overwhelmed. The way Sophie slowly relaxed, her guard dropping piece by piece until she was actually smiling, actually laughing at something Elena said about a particularly grumpy-looking octopus. "Did you know octopuses have 3 hearts?" Sophie asked Adrian when they stopped for lunch. "I didn't. That seems excessive." "It's efficient." She stabbed at her mac and cheese. 2 hearts pump blood to the gills, and 1 pumps it to the rest of the body. That way they can survive in low-oxygen environments. "Sophie's going to write a research paper on deep-sea adaptation," Elena said. "For school." "It's not due until next month," Sophie mumbled, "but I like doing it." They talked about octopuses and school and whether sharks were actually as dangerous as movies made them seem. Sophie started directing questions at Adrian. What did he do? Did he have kids? What was his favorite animal? When he mentioned Mia, her eyes lit up. "How old is she?" 4, and obsessed with dinosaurs. "I liked dinosaurs when I was 4. Sophie considered this. Does she know about Spinosaurus? Most people only know about T-Rex, but Spinosaurus was actually semi-aquatic and probably ate mostly fish. I will definitely tell her that. Adrian glanced at Elena, who was watching Sophie with an expression he couldn't quite read. Maybe you two could meet sometime. I bet Mia would love to hear about your marine biology research. Sophie looked at Elena. Could I? Of course. Elena's voice was steady, but her hand trembled slightly as she reached for her water. Adrian's family they're good people. Something passed between them, aunt and niece, fragile and new. Sophie nodded and went back to her lunch, and Elena's shoulders relaxed incrementally. They were going to be okay, Adrian thought. Not perfect, not smooth, but okay. Mrs. Patterson arrived at exactly 2 p.m., punctual and professional, in a gray suit that probably came from the same store as her personality. She had the kind of face that looked like it had never smiled without filling out the proper paperwork first. Ms. Vaughn, she said, shaking Elena's hand with the warmth of a business transaction. And you must be Sophie. Sophie, who'd been coaching Elena through proper introduction etiquette for the last 30 minutes, stepped forward. Hello, Mrs. Patterson. Would you like to come inside? Very polite. Mrs. Patterson's eyes swept the apartment, cataloging everything. Yes, let's have a look around. Elena's apartment was beautiful in the way expensive things usually were. Clean lines, modern furniture, art that probably cost more than Adrian's annual salary. But there were new additions. A small desk in the corner of the living room, covered in Sophie's homework and library books about marine life. Drawings on the refrigerator. A photo of Elena and Sophie at the aquarium that morning, printed and framed on the mantel. Mrs. Patterson noticed all of it. She made notes on a tablet, asked questions about daily routines, bedtimes, school performance. Sophie answered most of them with the careful precision of someone who'd been coached, and Elena backed her up when needed. Then Mrs. Patterson turned to Adrian. And you are? Adrian Cross, a friend of Elena's. I see. More notes. Are you often present in Sophie's life, Mr. Cross? I'm going to be. He caught Elena's eye, saw the flash of gratitude. I have a daughter around Sophie's age. They'll be spending time together. A support system. That's good. Mrs. Patterson looked at Elena. Ms. Vaughn, when we spoke on the phone, you mentioned you'd make yourself available for Sophie's needs at any time. Can you walk me through what that looks like practically, given your work schedule? Elena took a breath. This was the moment everything hinged on. I've restructured my entire calendar, she said. Mornings are for Sophie, getting her ready, breakfast together, driving her to school. I'm reachable by phone during the day for emergencies. Afternoons, I'm home by 5 unless there's a critical meeting, in which case Adrian's mother can provide care. Evenings and weekends are family time, no work. That's quite a change from your previous schedule. Yes. Elena's voice didn't waver. Sophie is my priority now. Everything else is secondary. Mrs. Patterson made more notes, asked about homework help, emotional support, how Elena handled Sophie's grief and behavioral issues. Elena answered honestly, sometimes too honestly, Adrian thought, admitting to moments of confusion and mistakes and not knowing the right thing to say. But that honesty seemed to land. Mrs. Patterson's expression softened slightly. Sophie, she said, turning to the girl, could you show me your room? They disappeared down the hallway. Elena immediately turned to Adrian, panic in her eyes. That was terrible, she whispered. I sounded incompetent. You sounded human. Adrian kept his voice low, which is what she needs to see. You're not trying to be perfect, Elena. You're trying to be present. What if it's not enough? Before he could answer, Sophie and Mrs. Patterson returned. The caseworker's expression was unreadable. Sophie has a very nice room, she said. Clearly you've put thought into making her comfortable here. We picked out the bedding together, Elena said, and the posters. She wanted the deep-sea creatures. I noticed. Mrs. Patterson checked her tablet one last time, then looked at Elena. Ms. Vaughn, I'll be honest, when we first started this evaluation, I had concerns. Your work history suggested someone whose priorities were firmly elsewhere. But what I've seen today, she paused. You're trying, really trying, and you're not doing it alone, which matters. Elena didn't move, barely seemed to breathe. I'm going to recommend continued placement with you, Mrs. Patterson said. Contingent on follow-up visits to ensure the changes you've made are sustainable. But based on what I've observed, I believe Sophie is better off with you than in the system. The sound Elena made was barely audible. Relief, joy, terror, all of it compressed into a single breath. Thank you, she managed. Mrs. Patterson gathered her things. Sophie is a remarkable child. She deserves stability and love. I trust you'll provide both. After she left, the apartment fell into shocked silence. Sophie looked at Elena. Elena looked at Adrian. And then Sophie launched herself at her aunt, wrapping thin arms around her waist. We did it, Sophie whispered into Elena's shirt. You didn't mess up. Elena's laugh was half a sob. Thanks for the vote of confidence, kiddo. Adrian watched them hold each other, and something in his chest pulled tight. This was what mattered. Not empires or board meetings or public perception. Just this. Two people who'd lost everything finding each other in the wreckage. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus Whitmore's assistant. Emergency board meeting Monday, 8 a.m. Attendance mandatory. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. But as Sophie pulled back and grinned at Elena, a real, genuine smile that transformed her entire face, Adrian thought maybe they had a fighting chance after all. That night, after Sophie was in bed and Adrian should have been heading home, he found himself still in Elena's apartment. They sat on opposite ends of her couch, exhausted and wired, processing everything that had happened. I can't believe she's staying, Elena said for the third time. I actually get to keep her. You were always going to keep her. Adrian had shed his jacket hours ago, tie long gone. Mrs. Patterson saw what everyone sees. You're terrified of failing, which means you care. That's half the battle right there. What's the other half? Actually showing up, which you did. Elena pulled her knees up, wrapping her arms around them. She looked younger like this, vulnerable in a way she never allowed at work. Monday's going to be bad, she said quietly. Whitmore has enough votes to force a leadership review. He's been building his coalition for months. Then we build a better one. Adrian shifted to face her. You have allies on that board, Elena. People who've seen what you can do. We just need to remind them. By Monday morning, that's 36 hours. Then we don't sleep. She looked at him, really looked at him, and Adrian felt the air shift. They were too close, had been dancing around this for too long. Why are you doing this? Elena asked. Really, not the polite answer, the real one. Adrian could lie, should lie, maintain the professional distance that had kept things simple for 3 years. Instead, he said, because losing you would break something in me I don't think I could fix. The words hung there, raw and honest and impossible to take back. Elena's eyes went wide. Adrian, you don't have to say anything. I know this is complicated and the timing is terrible, and you have 1,000 reasons to pretend I didn't just... He stopped, running a hand through his hair. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know. For a long moment, Elena didn't move. Then she uncurled from her defensive position and slid closer. Not touching, but close enough that Adrian could count her eyelashes if he wanted to. You saved my mother's life, he said quietly. You took care of me when I was falling apart, even though I never asked. You see me, Elena, not just what I can do for you, but... He gestured vaguely. Me. And I've been trying really hard not to fall in love with that. With you. Trying. Her voice was barely a whisper. Failing spectacularly. Elena reached out slowly, her fingers finding his. Their hands fit together like they'd been designed that way, and Adrian felt something click into place. I'm a mess, she said. I'm about to lose my company. I'm barely holding it together with Sophie, and I have no idea what I'm doing with any of this. Join the club. And you still... She couldn't finish the sentence. Yes. Adrian squeezed her hand. Still. They sat there in the quiet of her apartment, hands clasped, the city glowing beyond the windows. Tomorrow would bring the board meeting and whatever consequences came with it. But tonight, in this moment, they had this. Elena leaned her head on his shoulder. Stay, she said. Please. So he did. And when Sophie found them the next morning, both of them asleep on the couch with the sun streaming through the windows, she just smiled and went to make cereal for all 3 of them. Because sometimes family doesn't look like you planned. Sometimes it's built from broken pieces, and late nights, and people who choose to stay when leaving would be easier. Sometimes it's enough. The cereal Sophie made was too sweet, and the milk was nearly expired, but Adrian ate it anyway while Sophie explained the difference between anglerfish and viperfish with the kind of enthusiasm most people reserved for winning the lottery. Elena sat across from them at the kitchen table, still in yesterday's clothes, hair messed from sleep, looking more relaxed than he'd ever seen her. So the viperfish has these photophores along its body, Sophie said, gesturing with her spoon and sending drops of milk across the table. That's how it attracts prey in the deep sea where there's no light at all. But the anglerfish has this lure thing on its head that, Aunt Elena, you're not listening. I am listening. Elena wiped up the spilled milk with a napkin. Photophores, bioluminescence, deep-sea hunting strategies. You're thinking about work. Sophie's expression went flat. You always get this look when you're thinking about work. Adrian watched Elena's face shift through several emotions before landing on something that looked like guilt. She set down her coffee cup carefully, like it might shatter. You're right, she said. I was. I'm sorry. Sophie studied her aunt with those 2 old eyes. Is it about the board meeting tomorrow? You know about that? I heard you on the phone last night. Sophie pushed her cereal around the bowl. That man, Marcus something, he wants to fire you, doesn't he? Elena and Adrian exchanged a look. How much did you tell a 7-year-old about corporate politics and the very real possibility that her aunt might lose everything? He wants to, Elena said slowly, but he won't succeed. Adrian and I have a plan. What kind of plan? The kind where we remind everyone why your aunt is the best CEO that company has ever had, Adrian said, with facts and data and a presentation that'll make Marcus Whitmore regret ever opening his mouth. Sophie considered this. Can I help? Sweetie, it's complicated. I'm good at research. Sophie sat up straighter, defensive. I know how to find information and organize it. Mom used to say I was better at it than most adults. The mention of Claire hung in the air between them. Elena's fingers tightened around her coffee cup. Your mom was right, Adrian said before the silence could stretch too long. But this is adult stuff. Boring spreadsheets and financial projections? You'd fall asleep in 5 minutes. I like spreadsheets, Sophie muttered, but she was smiling slightly. Fine. But if you lose because you didn't let me help, I'm saying I told you so. Deal. Elena reached across the table and squeezed Sophie's hand. Thank you for offering, though. That means a lot. After breakfast, Adrian's phone rang. His mother's number. Please tell me Mia didn't burn down the house, he said by way of greeting. Your daughter is an angel, and you know it. His mother's voice was warm with amusement. But she's asking when her new friend is coming over. I may have promised dinosaur activities, and now I'm committed. Adrian looked at Sophie, who was pretending not to eavesdrop while very obviously eavesdropping. How do you feel about spending the day with a 4-year-old who thinks she's a paleontologist? Sophie's whole face changed. Really? Really, if it's okay with your aunt. Elena nodded, and Sophie was already running to get her shoes before anyone could change their minds. 20 minutes later, Adrian was buckling her into his car while she explained the differences between the Cretaceous and Jurassic periods with the kind of detail that suggested she'd memorized entire textbooks. She's a good kid, Adrian said to Elena as they stood by his car. The morning sun was breaking through the clouds, turning the wet pavement into mirrors. She is. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, looking smaller in the daylight, vulnerable. Adrian, about last night, we don't have to talk about it. Yes, we do. She met his eyes. You said things, true things, and I need you to know I heard them. Okay. That's it? Just okay? Adrian smiled. Elena, you're about to fight for your company. You have a 7-year-old who needs you present and stable. The last thing you need is me pushing for an answer about us when you have 1,000 other things demanding your attention. But what if I want to think about us? Her voice was quiet. What if that's the only thing keeping me sane right now? Something warm unfurled in his chest. Then think about it. We've got time. Do we? Elena glanced toward his car where Sophie was visible through the window, reading a book about marine mammals. Tomorrow, if the board votes against me, they won't. But if they do, I lose everything. The company, my reputation, maybe even my ability to keep Sophie. Her hands were shaking. And you'll be collateral damage because you chose to stand with me. Then we lose together. Adrian caught her hands, stilling them. But we're not going to lose, trust me. She wanted to. He could see it in her face, the desperate need to believe him warring with the part of her that had learned not to count on anyone. Finally, she nodded. Okay, she whispered. Okay. He kissed her forehead, quick and gentle, and then got in his car before he could do something stupid like kiss her properly and forget they had a war to prepare for. Sophie waited exactly 3 blocks before asking, Are you and Aunt Elena dating? Adrian nearly drove into a mailbox. What? You held her hand, and you stayed over last night, and you look at her like... Sophie scrunched up her face, thinking. Like how Dad used to look at Mom before everything got bad. Adrian's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Sophie never talked about her father, the man who'd left when she was 3 and never looked back. Claire had raised her daughter alone, and from what little Elena had shared, it hadn't been easy. Your aunt and I are friends, he said carefully. Good friends, but things are complicated right now. Because of the board meeting. And other stuff, adult stuff. Sophie was quiet for a moment. Then, do you love her? The question was so direct, so unflinchingly honest, that Adrian didn't even think about lying. Yeah, he said. I do. Good. Sophie went back to her book. She needs someone who won't leave. Everyone always leaves. The words hit harder than they should have. This kid had lost her mother, been abandoned by her father, and was now watching her aunt fight to keep from losing everything. No wonder she was obsessed with deep-sea creatures, things that survived in impossible conditions, adapted to pressure that would crush anything else. I'm not going anywhere, Adrian said. Sophie looked at him with those dark, measuring eyes. People always say that. I know, but I mean it. She studied him for another long moment, then nodded and went back to reading about humpback whale migration patterns. Adrian drove the rest of the way to his mother's house in silence, wondering what the hell he was doing. He just promised a traumatized 7-year-old he'd stay, had told her aunt he was in love with her, and was about to walk into a corporate battle that could destroy all their lives. Smart decisions were clearly not his strong suit today. His mother's house was a small ranch-style place in Queens, the kind of neighborhood where people actually knew their neighbors and kids still played in the street. Mia was waiting on the front porch, bouncing on her toes, wearing her favorite dinosaur shirt and rain boots, even though it had stopped raining hours ago. "Sophie!" She launched herself at the older girl the moment they got out of the car. "Do you like dinosaurs? I have 17 toy dinosaurs and 3 books, and I can name all of them, including the ones with the really long names that Daddy can't say." Sophie looked momentarily overwhelmed, then smiled. "I like ocean animals better, but dinosaurs are cool too." "Ocean animals are just water dinosaurs," Mia announced with the absolute confidence of a 4-year-old. "Grandma said so." Adrian's mother appeared in the doorway, already laughing. "I said some ocean animals are prehistoric, which is not the same thing. Hello, Sophie. I'm Rose. I've heard wonderful things about you." "Hi?" Sophie's shyness was back, her shoulders curving inward. "Mia, why don't you show Sophie your dinosaur collection while I talk to your father for a minute?" The girls disappeared inside, Mia already launching into an explanation of why Stegosaurus was underrated. Rose waited until they were out of earshot before turning to Adrian with raised eyebrows. "You look like you slept in your clothes." "Because I did." Adrian followed her into the kitchen. "At Elena's place, on the couch. Before you ask." "I wasn't going to ask." Rose poured him coffee without being asked, the good stuff she kept for emergencies. "But I'm going to say that you're playing with fire, sweetheart." "I know." "Do you?" She handed him the mug. "Elena Vaughn is your boss. She's also a billionaire CEO who's about to go to war with her own board. And you're a single dad with a secret trust fund and approximately zero business being anywhere near the situation," Adrian finished. "I know, Mom. I know all of it." Rose studied him. "But you're doing it anyway." "Yeah. Why?" Adrian thought about Elena crying in her office, about Sophie's too serious face, about waking up on that couch with Elena's head on his shoulder and feeling like maybe he'd found something worth fighting for. "Because they need someone in their corner," he said, "and because I'm tired of hiding who I am to make other people comfortable." His mother's expression softened. "You're talking about the money." Adrian's family wealth was something he'd spent years trying to escape. His grandfather had built a pharmaceutical empire, and when he died, he'd left a trust fund that made Adrian independently wealthy. But Adrian had watched that money destroy his father, watched the expectation and pressure turn a good man bitter. So he'd walked away, taken a different name, built a life where he was just another person trying to make it work. But lately, he'd been wondering if running from it was just another form of letting it control him. "If I help Elena fight this," he said, "people will find out about the trust fund, about who my family is, everything. And that scares you, terrifies me." He took a long drink of coffee. "But losing her scares me more." Rose was quiet for a moment, then she smiled. "Your grandfather would have liked her, you know. He always said the best leaders were the ones who were terrified of failing." From the living room came the sound of Mia's laughter and Sophie's quieter voice explaining something about bioluminescence. Normal kid sounds, the kind of thing Sophie probably hadn't had enough of in the last 8 months. "Keep them as long as you need," Rose said. "And Adrian, whatever you decide to do, I'm proud of you." He hugged his mother tight, then headed back to Manhattan to help Elena prepare for war. The rest of Sunday dissolved into spreadsheets and strategy sessions. Elena's dining room table became command central, covered in financial reports, board member profiles, and 3 years' worth of company performance data. They ordered Chinese food around 6 and barely touched it, too focused on building an airtight case for why Elena's leadership had been the best thing to happen to Vaughn Industries. "Whitmore is going to argue that my attention is divided," Elena said, highlighting another section of her presentation. "That taking on Sophie means I can't fully commit to the company. So we show them you've been running this company better than anyone while dealing with personal tragedy." Adrian pulled up another file. "Your numbers are incredible, Elena. Profit margins up 17% over 3 years. Employee retention at an all-time high. 6 major acquisitions that all performed above projections. Whitmore was against 4 of those acquisitions. Exactly. And you proved him wrong every time. Adrian moved to stand behind her chair, looking over her shoulder at the screen. He's not attacking your performance, he's attacking your character. Which means we defend both. Elena tilted her head back to look at him. How are you so calm about this? I'm not calm. I'm terrified. He squeezed her shoulders gently. But I'm also sure. You're going to walk into that room tomorrow and remind every single person why they made you CEO in the first place. And if they don't listen, then we move to Plan B. We don't have a Plan B. We will by morning. Adrian checked his watch. Almost 9 p.m. Take a break. Walk around. Breathe. You've been staring at that screen for 6 hours. Elena stood, stretching, and Adrian tried very hard not to notice the way her shirt rode up slightly or the curve of her waist. Now was not the time. Tell me about Sophie, he said, needing the distraction. Before all this, what was she like? Elena walked to the window, looking out at the city. Quiet, serious. She was always the kid reading in the corner while the other children played. Claire worried about it, thought maybe she was too isolated. But Sophie she processes things differently, deeply. She's a lot like you. Claire used to say that too. Elena's reflection in the window smiled, sad and distant. She'd call me when Sophie did something particularly stubborn and say, "Your niece is channeling you again," like it was my fault. Were you close? You and Claire? We were. Elena's voice went quiet. And then we weren't. I was building the company, working insane hours, and she was struggling to raise Sophie alone. We stopped calling, stopped visiting. And then one day I got a call from the hospital saying she'd been in an accident, and by the time I got there, she stopped. Adrian moved to stand beside her. She was already gone, Elena finished. And the last conversation we'd had was an argument about me missing Sophie's birthday party. Again. Elena, I can't get that back. Her voice cracked. I can't fix it. But I can. I can be here for Sophie now. I can be the person Claire needed me to be all along. Adrian wanted to tell her it wasn't her fault, that she couldn't have known, all the things people say to make grief manageable. But he'd learned from his own losses that sometimes there was no making it better. Sometimes you just had to sit with the pain. Sophie knows you love her, he said instead. That's what matters. Does she? Elena turned to face him. Or does she just know I'm trying really hard not to screw this up? Both, and that's okay. Adrian reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. You don't have to be perfect, Elena. You just have to show up. While she leaned into his touch, eyes closing briefly. When she opened them again, there was something different there. Determination? Maybe. Or resignation. Stay tonight, she said. Please. I know we have work to do, and it's probably a terrible idea, but She stopped. I don't want to be alone. Adrian knew all the reasons he should say no, knew this was crossing a line they couldn't uncross. But he also knew the feel of her hand in his, the sound of her laugh, the way she looked at him like he was something worth keeping. Okay, he said. I'll stay. They worked until past midnight, refining arguments and anticipating counterattacks. Elena rehearsed her presentation 3 times while Adrian played devil's advocate, throwing every objection he could think of. She was sharp, prepared, devastating in her logic. She was also exhausted. That's enough, Adrian said when she started the presentation for a 4th time. You know this backwards and forwards. Any more, and you'll second-guess yourself. One more run-through. Elena. He closed her laptop. Sleep. Actual sleep. You're no good to anyone if you walk in there tomorrow running on fumes. She wanted to argue. He could see it in the set of her jaw. But instead, she just nodded, suddenly looking very young and very scared. What if it's not enough? She whispered. What if I do everything right and they still vote me out? Then we deal with it, together. Adrian stood and held out his hand. Come on, couch or bed? Couch. A small smile. I seem to sleep better there lately. They ended up on opposite ends of the couch again, this time with an actual blanket. Elena curled into her corner, and Adrian stretched out on his, and they lay there in the dark, listening to the city hum beyond the windows.
Adrian?
Elena's voice was soft.
Yeah? Thank you for all of this. For, she paused, for not running when things got complicated. Where else would I go? He heard her breath hitch just slightly. Then she was moving, crossing the space between them, and suddenly she was pressed against him, her head on his chest, his arms coming around her instinctively. This okay? She asked. Yeah. His voice came out rougher than intended. This is okay.
They fell asleep like that, tangled together. And when Adrian's phone alarm went off at 5 a.m., Elena was still tucked against him, her hand fisted in his shirt like she was afraid he'd disappear. He didn't move for a long moment, just held her, memorizing the weight of her in his arms. Whatever happened today, whatever the board decided, he wanted to remember this. The quiet before the storm. Elena stirred, then went still as she realized where she was.
Morning, she mumbled into his chest.
Morning yourself. She pulled back just enough to look at him, hair messed and eyes still soft with sleep. Did we sleep? We slept. Adrian brushed hair out of her face. Though if you're asking if I spent the entire night thinking about kissing you, the answer is yes. Elena's laugh was surprised and genuine. We have terrible timing. The worst. After today, she stopped. If we make it through today, when we make it through today, Adrian corrected. When we make it through, Elena continued, something fierce in her eyes now. I want to have a real conversation about us, about what this is. I'd like that. They stayed like that for another minute, foreheads pressed together, breathing the same air. Then reality crashed back in, and Elena was pulling away, already shifting into CEO mode. I need to shower and change. You should too. We need to be at the office by 7 to prep the conference room. Bossy, Adrian said, but he was smiling. You like it? Yeah, I really do. Elena disappeared into her bedroom, and Adrian called his mother to check on the girls. Mia was still asleep, but Sophie was apparently already awake and reading about deep-sea trenches. She asked if you and Elena won the fight yet, Rose said. Fight's not until 8. Tell her we're working on it. Adrian? Whatever happens, you did the right thing. Helping her. I know, Mom. Thanks. He hung up and stared at his phone for a moment, then made a decision. He opened his banking app and transferred a significant amount from his trust fund to his regular account. If Elena needed a war chest, if things went south and she needed capital to fight back, he wanted to be ready. The money he'd spent years running from might finally be useful for something that mattered. Elena emerged from her bedroom 20 minutes later in a navy suit that was all business, hair pulled back, makeup perfect. She looked like armor. She looked devastating. Ready? She asked. Adrian straightened his tie. He'd had a spare in his car, along with a clean shirt. Not ideal, but better than showing up in yesterday's clothes. Let's go remind them who runs this company, he said. The drive to Vaughn Industries was quiet. Elena's hands were steady on the wheel, but Adrian could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she kept checking her mirrors like she expected an ambush. They arrived at 6:45. The building was mostly empty, just security and a few early risers. They rode the elevator in silence, and Adrian watched Elena's reflection in the polished doors. She was somewhere else already, running through scenarios, preparing for battle. The conference room on the 42nd floor was larger than most people's apartments, with windows overlooking the city and a table that could seat 30. Elena's presentation was already loaded on the screen. They ran through it one last time, adjusting slides, sharpening arguments. At 7:30, board members started arriving. Adrian recognized them from Elena's briefings. Richard Chen, the CFO, who'd been with the company since Elena's father's time. Margaret Torres, who had made her fortune in tech and had been Elena's strongest supporter. James Park, the wild card who could vote either way depending on which argument landed better. And Marcus Whitmore, of course, silver-haired and expensive-suited, with the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. He walked in at 7:55 with 2 other board members in tow, and his gaze swept over Elena with barely concealed contempt. Elena, he said, I hope you're prepared. This won't be pleasant. I'm always prepared, Marcus. Her voice could have cut glass. Are you? Adrian stayed in the back of the room, technically not part of the meeting, but close enough to provide silent support. He caught Elena's eye once, and she gave him the smallest nod. At exactly 8 a.m., Richard Chen called the meeting to order. We're here to discuss concerns raised by board member Whitmore regarding Miss Vaughn's fitness to continue as CEO, he said formally. Marcus, you have the floor. Whitmore stood, triggering his own presentation. Thank you, Richard. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll be direct. Elena Vaughn has served this company admirably for 3 years, but recent developments have made it clear that her priorities are no longer aligned with shareholder interests. The first slide appeared. A photo of Elena leaving work early, date stamped from 2 weeks ago. The second, a tabloid article speculating about her mysterious personal life. The third, Sophie, face carefully blurred, but clearly a child. Ms. Vaughn has taken on guardianship of a minor, Whitmore continued. A noble gesture, certainly, but one that requires time, attention, and emotional resources that should be directed toward this company. We've already seen the impact: missed meetings, early departures, divided focus. And I believe we owe it to our shareholders to ensure leadership that is fully, completely committed. He wasn't wrong about the facts. Elena had been leaving early, had been distracted, but the way Whitmore framed it, the implication that caring for Sophie was somehow disqualifying. Adrian's hands curled into fists. Whitmore continued for another 10 minutes, building his case with carefully selected data that painted Elena as increasingly unreliable. When he finished, he sat down with a satisfied smile. Ms. Vaughn, Richard said. Your response? Elena stood. She didn't look nervous. She looked like a woman who'd been waiting for this fight her entire life. Thank you, Richard. Marcus, interesting presentation, though I noticed you conveniently left out some context. She clicked to her first slide. Let's talk about what's actually happened during my time as CEO. The numbers appeared on screen, stark and undeniable. Revenue growth, market share expansion, stock price performance that outpaced every competitor in their sector. Marcus opposed the Chen Industries acquisition, Elena said, argued it was too risky, would drain resources. That acquisition generated $42 million in profit last year alone. Next slide. He opposed expanding into renewable energy. That division now accounts for 18% of our revenue and is growing faster than any other sector. Another slide. He opposed the restructuring of our supply chain. That restructuring saved us $16 million annually. She paused, letting it sink in. I could go on, but I think the pattern is clear. Marcus has been wrong about every major strategic decision this company has made in 3 years, so forgive me if I don't take his concerns about my leadership very seriously. Whitmore's jaw tightened. This isn't about past decisions. You're right, it's about future ones. Elena's voice sharpened. It's about the fact that I've been outperforming every metric you set, and you're threatened by it. You're threatened by a woman half your age who runs this company better than you ever could. So you're using my personal life as ammunition because you can't attack my actual performance. That's not, let me finish. Elena's eyes were cold. Yes, I've taken guardianship of my niece. Yes, that requires time and attention, but I've also restructured my schedule to accommodate both responsibilities. I'm still hitting every target, still available when it matters, still making the decisions that keep this company profitable. The difference is, I'm no longer performing the theater of overwork that you seem to value more than actual results. She clicked to the next slide. Performance metrics from the last 3 months, the period where she'd been caring for Sophie. Still strong, still growing. The question before this board isn't whether I'm capable of doing this job while raising a child, Elena said. The question is whether you trust my judgment, whether you trust that when I say I can handle both, I mean it, and whether you're willing to let outdated ideas about work-life balance cost this company its most effective leader. The room was silent. Adrian could see board members exchanging glances, recalculating. Then Margaret Torres spoke up. Elena makes a compelling point. Her performance hasn't suffered. If anything, the numbers show improvement. The numbers don't show the risk, Whitmore argued. What happens when there's a crisis? When Sophie needs her and the company needs her at the same time? We're supposed to gamble $800 million on the hope that she can juggle both. Life doesn't stop for convenience, Marcus. This from James Park, the wild card. We all have families. Responsibilities outside this room. The idea that Elena should be penalized for acknowledging that seems, he paused, short-sighted. Whitmore was losing ground. Adrian could see it in the way his shoulders tensed, the way his eyes darted around the room looking for allies. I move for a vote of no confidence, Whitmore said abruptly. Let's make this official. Seconded, said one of his supporters. Richard Chen looked at Elena. Do you have anything else to add? Elena took a breath. This was it, the moment everything hinged on. Just this, she said quietly. I love this company. My father built it, and I've poured everything I have into making it better. But I also love my niece, and I won't apologize for that. If this board decides that caring for a child makes me unfit to lead, then maybe this isn't the company I thought it was. But I believe you're better than that. I believe you can see past Marcus's fear and recognize that diversity and experience, including parenthood, makes leaders stronger, not weaker. She sat down. The vote was called. Hands raised. Adrian counted silently, his heart hammering. When Richard tallied the results, his expression was carefully neutral. Motion for no confidence fails, he announced. 7 votes against, 4 in favor. Ms. Vaughn retains her position as CEO. The relief that crashed through Adrian was almost physical. Elena's face remained composed, but he saw her hands unclench under the table. However, Richard continued, the board would like to see monthly performance reviews for the next quarter, just to ensure continued stability. Of course, Elena said smoothly. Whatever the board requires. The meeting adjourned. Board members filed out, some offering Elena quiet congratulations, others leaving without comment. Whitmore left without a word, his expression promising this wasn't over. When the room finally cleared, Elena turned to Adrian. Her composure cracked just slightly. We won, she said, like she couldn't quite believe it. You won. Adrian crossed to her. That was incredible. You destroyed him. I couldn't have done it without... She was interrupted by her phone ringing. Unknown number. She answered, and Adrian watched her face go pale. What? She said. When? How long? She listened, and whatever she was hearing made her sink into a chair. I understand. Yes, I'm on my way. She hung up. Her hands were shaking. That was the school, she said quietly. Sophie ran away. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Sophie ran away. 4 words that turned Elena's victory into ash. What do you mean she ran away? Adrian was already grabbing his jacket. From school? Where could she even go? Elena was on her feet, moving toward the door with jerky, panicked movements that looked nothing like her usual controlled efficiency. They said she went to the bathroom during second period and never came back. They checked everywhere, the library, the gym, the cafeteria. She's just gone. Did they call the police? They're waiting for me to get there first. School policy or something. Elena's voice cracked. I just won the board meeting and my niece is missing and I can't. Adrian caught her arm, steadying her. We'll find her. Do you have any idea where she might go? No. Maybe. I don't know. Elena pressed her hands to her face, breathing too fast. She's been having nightmares about being taken away. What if she heard about the board meeting somehow and thought I was going to lose and they'd put her in foster care? Elena, look at me. Adrian waited until her eyes met his. We're going to find her, but I need you to think. Places she's mentioned, places that feel safe to her. Elena forced herself to take a breath. Then another. Her mind was working through the panic, cataloging information. The aquarium. She loves the aquarium, but that's in Brooklyn. There's no way she could get there by herself. Anywhere else? The library near my apartment. She goes there sometimes after school to read. Elena was already moving again, this time with purpose. And there's a small marine biology research center in Queens that does public tours. She made me promise we'd go next month. Give me the addresses. I'll check the library and the research center. You go to the school, talk to the administrators, see if anyone saw which direction she went. They split up in the parking garage. Elena's hands were shaking so badly she could barely get her key in the ignition. Adrian leaned through her car window. Hey, he said quietly. She's smart and she knows the city. She's probably somewhere safe, just scared. She's 7 years old and alone. Elena's eyes were wild. Anything could happen. Nothing's going to happen. We'll find her. He squeezed her hand. Call me the second you hear anything. Elena nodded and pulled out of the garage too fast, tires squealing. Adrian watched her go, then got in his own car and immediately called his mother. Adrian, how did the meeting? Sophie's missing. She ran away from school. Can you check if she tried to get to your house? There was a beat of silence, then his mother's voice went sharp and focused. I'll call you right back. Adrian punched the address of the library into his GPS and drove, his mind racing through possibilities. Sophie was 7, but she was smart, resourceful. The kind of kid who'd memorized subway maps and probably knew more about navigating the city than most adults, which meant she could be anywhere. His phone rang. His mother. She's not here, Rose said. But I checked with the neighbors, Mrs. Chen across the street said she saw a little girl matching Sophie's description getting on the Q train about an hour ago, heading toward Manhattan. Did she seem upset? Mrs. Chen said she looked determined, like she was on a mission. Determined, not panicked. That was something. Thanks, Mom. If she shows up, I'll call immediately. Find her, Adrian. He hung up and rerouted toward Elena's apartment building. If Sophie was heading into Manhattan, she might be trying to get to Elena's place. It was the closest thing to home the kid had. Traffic was brutal. Adrian weaved through it with more aggression than usual, earning honks and middle fingers he didn't acknowledge. His phone buzzed with a text from Elena. School says she left through the side entrance near the playground. Security camera shows her heading toward the subway station, so she definitely took the train. Adrian texted back. My mom's neighbor saw her on the Q train an hour ago, heading into Manhattan. I'm going to your apartment. Elena's response was immediate. I'm coming too. The next 20 minutes were the longest of Adrian's life. He kept thinking about Sophie's face when she'd asked if he and Elena were dating, the way she'd said everyone always leaves. A kid that young shouldn't know that kind of loss. Shouldn't have to run because she was afraid of being abandoned again. He reached Elena's building and parked illegally, not caring. The doorman recognized him from the weekend. Mr. Cross? Is Miss Vaughn expecting you? Have you seen her niece, Sophie? 7 years old, dark hair. I have, actually. The doorman checked his logbook. She came through about 45 minutes ago. Used the spare key Miss Vaughn gave her. I asked if everything was okay, and she said she forgot something for school. Relief crashed through Adrian so hard he had to lean against the desk. She's upstairs? As far as I know. Should I call up? No, just let me go up. Please. The doorman hesitated, then nodded. Adrian took the elevator to Elena's floor, his heart hammering. When he knocked on the apartment door, there was no answer. He tried the handle. Locked. Sophie? He called through the door. It's Adrian. Your aunt is really worried about you. Can you open the door? Silence. I'm not mad, he continued. Nobody's mad. We just want to make sure you're safe. More silence. Then, so quiet he almost missed it. Is Aunt Elena losing her job? Adrian leaned his forehead against the door. No, she won. The board voted to keep her as CEO. You're lying. I'm not. I was there. I watched her destroy the guy who tried to fire her. He paused. But she can't really celebrate because she's terrified something happened to you. So, if you could open the door, that would be really helpful. He heard footsteps. The lock clicked. The door opened a crack and Sophie's face appeared, blotchy and tear-streaked. She really won? Her voice was small. She really won. Adrian crouched down to her level. Can I come in? Sophie stepped back and Adrian entered the apartment. She was still in her school uniform, backpack abandoned by the door. Her face was a mess of dried tears and defiance. I heard you and Aunt Elena talking last night, Sophie said, about the board meeting and how that man wanted to fire her because of me. So I thought if I wasn't here, if they thought she wasn't taking care of me anymore, maybe they'd leave her alone. The logic was 7-year-old logic, flawed and heartbreaking and somehow perfectly sensible in its own way. Sophie, that's not how it works, Adrian said gently. Your aunt fought for you. She told an entire room of powerful people that you matter more than their opinions. And she won because she was right. But what if she hadn't won? What if they fired her and it was my fault? It wouldn't have been your fault.
It would have been their fault for being short-sighted and stupid. Adrian sat on the floor, giving her space. Your aunt chose you. She chose you over making things easy. That's not something to run away from. Sophie was crying again, quiet tears that she tried to hide by looking at the floor. Everyone says they're choosing me and then they leave. Dad left. Mom, her voice broke. Mom didn't choose to leave, but she still left. And Aunt Elena, she tries really hard, but she doesn't know what she's doing, and I'm scared. Of what? That I'm too much, the words came out in a rush. That I'm too hard to take care of, and she'll get tired and send me away like Dad did. Adrian's chest felt tight.
He thought about all the ways Sophie had been making herself smaller, easier, less of a burden. The careful politeness, the way she never asked for anything. A 7-year-old shouldn't have to work that hard to be lovable. You're not too much, he said. You're exactly the right amount of Sophie. And your aunt, she's not going to get tired. She's stubborn, and she doesn't give up on things that matter to her. You matter to her.
How do you know? Because I've worked for her for 3 years, and I've never seen her fight for anything the way she fought for you today. Adrian pulled out his phone. I'm going to call her now and tell her you're safe, okay? Sophie nodded, wiping at her face. Elena answered on the first ring. Did you find her? I'm with her at your apartment. She's safe. The sound Elena made was half sob, half laugh. Thank God, thank God. I'm 10 minutes away. Don't let her leave, please. We're not going anywhere. Adrian looked at Sophie. Your aunt wants to talk to you. He held out the phone. Sophie took it hesitantly. Aunt Elena? Her voice was so small. Whatever Elena said on the other end made Sophie's face crumple. She nodded, even though Elena couldn't see her, tears streaming down her cheeks. I'm sorry, Sophie whispered. I'm sorry I ran away. I thought maybe if I wasn't there, you'd be better off. And she stopped, listening. Okay, I'll wait here. I promise. She handed the phone back to Adrian. He could hear Elena's ragged breathing through the speaker. Thank you, Elena said, for finding her, for... Just drive safe, Adrian interrupted. We'll be here. He hung up and looked at Sophie, who was sitting cross-legged on the floor now, hugging her knees. She looked exhausted, lost. Want to tell me about the deep-sea creatures while we wait? Adrian asked. Sophie looked up, surprised. Really? Really? I've been wondering about anglerfish. How do they see in the dark if their lure is on their head? Doesn't it blind them? And just like that, Sophie launched into an explanation of photophore placement and retinal adaptation in deep-sea fish. Her voice was still shaky, but she was engaged now, distracted from her fear. They were discussing the hunting patterns of giant squid when Elena burst through the door. She looked wrecked, hair falling out of its neat bun, makeup smudged, still in her board meeting suit, but rumpled now. She saw Sophie and stopped, like her legs wouldn't carry her any further. Sophie, she breathed. Sophie stood slowly. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. Come here. Elena's voice cracked on the words. Please come here. Sophie crossed the room in 3 running steps and threw herself at Elena, who caught her and held on like she was drowning. They sank to the floor together, Elena's arms wrapped tight around her niece, Sophie's face buried in her aunt's shoulder. I thought I lost you, Elena said into Sophie's hair. I thought... She couldn't finish. I'm sorry. I just thought if I left you'd be better and you wouldn't lose your job and... No. Elena pulled back enough to look at Sophie's face, her hands cupping the girl's cheeks. No, sweetheart. You don't make anything harder. You make everything matter. Do you understand? Everything I did today, I did for you, because you're worth fighting for. But the board can go to hell. Elena's language made Sophie's eyes widen. Sorry, the board they can deal with their opinions. What matters is that we're a family now, you and me, and families don't give up on each other. Sophie's bottom lip trembled. Even when I mess up? Especially when you mess up. Elena tucked Sophie's hair behind her ears, gentle and careful. That's when you need family most. When you're scared or confused or you've done something you regret, that's when I'm going to be right here. Promise? I promise. Elena pulled Sophie close again. I promise I'm not leaving. I promise you're not too much. And I promise that even when I'm terrible at this, which I will be sometimes, I'm not giving up. They stayed like that for a long time, Elena rocking Sophie gently while the kid cried into her shoulder. Adrian stood quietly by the window, giving them space, his throat tight with emotions he couldn't quite name. Eventually, Sophie's tears slowed. She pulled back, wiping at her face with her sleeve. I really messed up, didn't I? She said. The school is probably going to call Mrs. Patterson and tell her I ran away. Elena and Adrian exchanged a look. They'd both been thinking the same thing. This was exactly the kind of incident that could make a caseworker question placement stability. We'll deal with it, Elena said firmly. Together. All three of us. All three. Sophie looked at Adrian. If that's okay with you, Adrian said. I'm kind of invested in making sure you two are okay now. Sophie studied him with those two old eyes. Then she nodded. Okay, but you have to promise you're not leaving either. I promise. Adults always promise and then they leave anyway. I know. Adrian crouched down again. But I'm still going to promise, because that's what you do when you care about people. You keep promising until they believe you. Sophie absorbed this. Then, can Mia come over? I want to tell her about the giant squid. The shift in topic was so sudden, so perfectly 7-year-old, that both Elena and Adrian had to suppress smiles. After we call your school and apologize for scaring them, Elena said, and after we have a serious conversation about the subway and safety and never running away again. I know. I'm sorry. Sophie looked genuinely contrite. I just got scared. I know, baby. Elena stood, pulling Sophie up with her. But next time you're scared, you talk to me. Deal? Deal. Elena made the call to Sophie's school while Adrian ordered pizza. The conversation with the principal was tense. Elena had to do a lot of apologizing and promising this would never happen again. But ultimately, the school agreed not to involve child services as long as Sophie saw the school counselor and Elena provided documentation that she was addressing the underlying issues. When she hung up, Elena looked exhausted. They want a letter from a therapist saying Sophie's in treatment, she said, which means I need to find a child psychologist who specializes in grief and trauma, make an appointment, and somehow convince Sophie to actually talk to them. I know someone, Adrian said. Dr. Martinez, she worked with Mia after... He stopped, glancing at Sophie, who was absorbed in a book about octopuses. After her mother left. She's good. Really good. Elena looked at him, and there was something in her expression that made Adrian's heart skip. Gratitude, yes, but also something deeper. Something that looked like she was finally letting herself believe he meant it when he said he wasn't leaving. Thank you, she said quietly. The pizza arrived. They ate sitting on the floor of Elena's living room, Sophie between them, slowly returning to her normal, serious self. She explained bioluminescence to them between bites of pepperoni, and Elena asked questions that showed she was actually listening, and Adrian watched them both with the strange sensation that his life had just fundamentally changed direction. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus Whitmore. This isn't over. Adrian deleted it without responding. Let Whitmore plot. Let him try. They'd won today, and they'd keep winning. After dinner, Sophie fell asleep on the couch, exhausted from the emotional roller coaster. Elena covered her with a blanket and stood there for a moment, just watching her niece sleep. She looks like Claire, she said softly. Same expression when she's sleeping, like she's somewhere better. Adrian moved to stand beside her. You okay? I don't know. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. I won the board meeting. I found Sophie. I should feel relieved, but all I can think about is how close we came to... She stopped. What if she'd gotten hurt? What if something had happened and I was sitting in that conference room defending my ability to be a parent while my kid was lost in the city? But she didn't get hurt, and you did find her. This time. Elena turned to face him. Adrian, I don't know if I can do this. The company, Sophie, trying to be everything to everyone. Something's going to break. Then let it. She blinked. What? Let something break. Adrian caught her hands. You've been holding everything together with sheer force of will for months, maybe years, but you can't sustain that forever. Something has to give. If I let go, you'll have people to catch you, me, your team.
The board members who voted for you today because they believe in you. He squeezed her hands. You're not alone anymore, Elena. Stop acting like you are. She looked at him for a long moment, and he saw the exact second she decided to trust him. Her shoulders dropped slightly, some of the tension leaving her body. I'm scared, she admitted, of failing her, of failing the company, of... She glanced at Sophie, then back at him. Of this, whatever this is between us, because if I let myself want it and then lose it, you won't lose it.
You can't promise that.
No, Adrian agreed, but I can promise I'm going to try really hard not to let you down. That's all any of us can do. Elena closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, there were tears there again, but she was smiling. Stay tonight? She asked. Both of you, you and Mia. I don't want to be alone with Sophie. Not tonight. We'll stay. Adrian pulled out his phone. Let me call my mom. She can bring Mia over. An hour later, his mother showed up with Mia, who was vibrating with excitement about a sleepover. She immediately woke Sophie up, gently for a 4-year-old, and started telling her about a book they could read together about sharks. Rose took one look at Elena's face and pulled her into a hug without asking permission first. You did good, she said firmly. You're doing good. Don't let anyone tell you different. Elena's composure cracked again, and she hugged Rose back like she was drowning. Adrian watched his mother comfort the woman he loved, watched Sophie and Mia already bonding over a picture book, and felt something settle in his chest. This was what family looked like, messy and imperfect and held together by sheer stubborn refusal to give up on each other. They ordered more food, Thai this time, because Mia was going through a pad Thai phase. The girls ate on the floor in front of the TV, watching a documentary about coral reefs. The adults sat at the kitchen table and Rose told stories about Adrian's childhood that made him want to disappear into the floor. He was the most serious 6-year-old you ever met, she said. Used to organize his toy cars by make and model. Had a whole system. Mom, I had a system for my stuffed animals, Elena said, and there was something soft in her voice, sorted by species, then by size within each species category. See? Rose grinned. You two were made for each other. The comment hung in the air. Adrian and Elena looked at each other, and something passed between them. Acknowledgement, maybe. Permission. Rose caught the look and stood smoothly. I should get going. Let you all settle in. You don't have to, Elena started. I do. You've had a hell of a day and you need time with your people. Rose squeezed Elena's shoulder. Call me if you need anything. And Sophie? She raised her voice slightly. You can come visit Mia any time. Our door is always open. Sophie looked up from the documentary. Really? Really? After Rose left, the apartment felt smaller, more intimate. The girls eventually crashed in Sophie's room. Mia in a sleeping bag on the floor, Sophie in her bed, both of them talking in sleepy whispers about their favorite sea creatures. Adrian and Elena were left alone in the living room with the wreckage of the day scattered around them. I should probably go home, Adrian said, not moving from the couch. You should probably stay, Elena countered, not looking at him. Elena, I know it's complicated. I know we work together and there are 1,000 reasons to keep things professional, but right now, tonight, she turned to face him. I just want to be honest about what I want. And what I want is you. Here, with me. Adrian's heart was a hammering. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm tired of pretending this is just professional concern. I'm tired of acting like I don't think about you constantly, like I didn't spend 3 years watching you be kind and brilliant and completely unaware of how much I... She stopped, took a breath. I'm falling in love with you, Adrian. I might already be there. And I know the timing is terrible and everything is chaos, but I needed you to know. For a moment, Adrian couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at this woman who just laid herself bare in a way he knew cost her everything. The timing is terrible, he agreed. Her face started to close off, and he caught her hand. But I don't care. He pulled her closer. I don't care about timing or professional boundaries or any of it. I've been in love with you since you made me laugh during that god-awful quarterly review presentation. You did this whole bit about projected earnings that was somehow both hilarious and accurate, and I thought,
This woman is going to ruin me. Elena's laugh was shaky. I don't remember that. I do. I remember everything about you. Adrian cupped her face, thumbs brushing away tears she probably didn't realize she was crying. So yeah, the timing is terrible, but I'm all in anyway, if you'll have me. If I'll have you, Elena's voice broke. Adrian, you just spent the entire day fighting for me. You found my niece when I was falling apart. You've been… She shook her head. You've been everything I needed before I even knew I needed it. Then let me keep being that. Adrian leaned his forehead against hers. Let me be your person. Let me help carry this. Okay, she whispered. Okay. And then she kissed him. It wasn't smooth or practiced. Their noses bumped. Her hands were shaking where they gripped his shirt, but it was real and messy and perfect in all the ways that mattered. When they pulled apart, Elena was smiling, actually smiling, not the careful professional version, but something genuine and a little wild. We're doing this, she said. We're actually doing this. Looks like it. My board is going to have opinions. Let them. The press is going to speculate. They already do. Adrian kissed her again, softer this time. We'll figure it out. Together. They stayed up too late, talking about everything and nothing. About Adrian's trust fund and why he'd hidden it. About Elena's father and the impossible expectations he'd left behind. About Sophie and Mia and building something that looked like family out of broken pieces. Eventually, exhaustion won. They fell asleep on the couch again, tangled together, and when Sophie found them in the morning, she just smiled and went to make cereal for everyone. Because this was their family now, complicated and imperfect and held together by people who refused to give up on each other, and maybe that was enough, maybe it was more than enough. When Adrian's phone buzzed with another threatening text from Marcus Whitmore, he deleted it without reading and pulled Elena closer. Let Whitmore plot. Let the board worry. Let the press speculate. They had each other now. And they had 2 kids who needed breakfast and probably wanted to watch another documentary about deep-sea creatures. Everything else could wait. The cereal was still too sweet, and the documentary about deep-sea creatures was playing for the 3rd time, but nobody seemed to mind. Sophie and Mia sat cross-legged on the floor, arguing over whether the giant squid or the colossal squid was more impressive, while Adrian made coffee and Elena stood at the window watching the city wake up. She looked different in the morning light, softer somehow. Her hair was still a mess from sleeping on the couch, and she was wearing the same clothes from yesterday's board meeting, but the tension that usually lived in her shoulders had eased. She looked like someone who'd finally exhaled after holding their breath for years. You're staring, she said without turning around. Can you blame me? Adrian handed her a mug. You just told me you're falling in love with me. I'm allowed to stare a little. Elena accepted the coffee, her fingers brushing his. I said I might already be there. Past tense. Even better. She turned to look at him, and there was something vulnerable in her expression. I don't know how to do this. The relationship thing. I've spent the last decade focused on work, and before that, I was focused on proving myself, and She gestured vaguely. I don't have a roadmap for this. Good. Me neither. Adrian leaned against the counter. We'll figure it out as we go. That doesn't scare you? Terrifies me, he smiled, but most good things do. They were interrupted by Mia running into the kitchen, Sophie trailing behind her. Daddy, can Sophie come to the park with us? She says she's never been to the one with the big slide, and that's just wrong. Everyone should go to the big slide park at least once. Adrian looked at Elena, who looked at Sophie. The kid was already nodding enthusiastically, her earlier fear seemingly forgotten in the excitement of having a friend. Please? Sophie added. I promise I won't run away again. The reminder of yesterday hung in the air for a moment. Elena's smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. If it's okay with Adrian, she said carefully. It's more than okay. Adrian ruffled Mia's hair. But first, everyone needs to actually get dressed. Sophie, you're still in your school uniform from yesterday. 20 minutes later, they were piling into Adrian's car, both girls in the back seat, Elena in front, all of them looking slightly rumpled but content. It was such a normal scene, such an ordinary family moment, that it made Adrian's chest ache.
The park was crowded with the usual weekend chaos, kids screaming, parents drinking coffee like it was medicine, dogs chasing tennis balls with single-minded determination. Mia dragged Sophie toward the infamous big slide immediately, leaving Adrian and Elena to follow at a slower pace. "This is weird, right?" Elena said, watching the girls climb the ladder. "Yesterday I was fighting to keep my job and my niece, and today I'm at a playground like a normal person." "You are a normal person. You just also happen to run a company worth $800 million. That's not normal, Adrian." "Okay, fine. You're exceptional. But that doesn't mean you can't also be someone who goes to parks and watches kids play." He caught her hand. "You're allowed to have both." Elena looked at their joined hands like she was still getting used to the idea. "People are going to notice. About us." "Probably. The board will have opinions." "Let them." Adrian squeezed her hand. "We already survived Whitmore trying to get you fired. Whatever comes next, we can handle it." A woman walking past did a double take when she recognized Elena, her eyes widening. She pulled out her phone, probably already texting someone about spotting Elena Vaughn at a playground holding hands with some guy. By Monday morning, it would be all over the office gossip channels. Elena saw it happen and tensed, but she didn't let go of Adrian's hand. "That's new," she said quietly. "What is?" "Not caring what people think." She smiled, but it was shaky. "Or caring and doing it anyway. I'm not sure which." They found a bench with a view of the slide and sat down. Sophie went down first, cautious and controlled, while Mia followed immediately after with her arms in the air, screaming with joy. The contrast between them was almost comical, Sophie's measured approach versus Mia's absolute commitment to chaos. "They're good together," Elena observed. "Sophie needs someone who'll push her out of her comfort zone, and Mia needs someone who'll remind her that not everything requires maximum volume." Adrian watched his daughter try to convince Sophie to go down the slide backwards. "Thank you, by the way." "For what?" "For letting me into this. Into your life with Sophie. You could have handled everything alone. You're stubborn enough, but you didn't." Elena was quiet for a moment. "I spent 8 months trying to do it alone. Do you know what that got me? A caseworker who thought I was too cold to raise a child, a board that questioned my commitment, and a niece who was so scared of being abandoned that she ran away." She turned to look at him. "Alone doesn't work. I'm done pretending it does." Adrian's phone buzzed, a text from his mother. "How's the sleepover going? Should I be expecting grandchildren announcements soon?" He showed Elena the message and she laughed. Actually laughed, bright and genuine. "Your mother is not subtle." "Never has been." Adrian texted back. "One crisis at a time, Mom." Rose's response was immediate. "That's not a no." They spent 2 hours at the park. The girls played until they were sweaty and grass-stained, then demanded ice cream with the kind of certainty that left no room for negotiation. They found a shop 3 blocks away, and Sophie ordered mint chocolate chip while explaining to Mia why it was scientifically the best flavor. "It has chlorophyll in it," she said seriously. "That's what makes it green, same stuff that's in plants." "So it's healthy?" Mia's eyes were wide. "Exactly." Adrian and Elena exchanged amused looks while the girls constructed elaborate justifications for why ice cream was basically a vegetable. It was so painfully normal, so perfectly ordinary, that Adrian almost forgot about the corporate warfare waiting for them on Monday. But reality crashed back in when they returned to Elena's apartment and found Mrs. Patterson waiting in the lobby. The caseworker looked exactly as stern as she had during the home visit, her gray suit somehow even more severe in the afternoon light. She stood when she saw them enter, her expression unreadable. "Miss Vaughn," she said. "I hope I'm not intruding. The doorman was kind enough to let me wait." Elena's entire body went rigid. Adrian felt her hand tighten around his, saw the way Sophie immediately moved closer to her aunt. "Mrs. Patterson?" Elena's voice was controlled, but Adrian could hear the fear underneath. "I wasn't expecting you." "I'm aware. I received a concerning call from Sophie's school yesterday." Mrs. Patterson's eyes moved to Sophie, who was trying very hard to be invisible behind Elena. "About an incident." "I can explain," Elena started. "I'd like to hear from Sophie first, if that's all right." Mrs. Patterson crouched down, putting herself at eye level with the girl. "Sophie, can you tell me what happened yesterday? Why you left school?" Sophie looked at Elena, who nodded encouragingly, despite the panic Adrian could see in her eyes. The girl took a deep breath. I got scared, she said quietly. I heard Aunt Elena talking about the board meeting and how someone wanted to fire her because of me. So I thought if I left, maybe they'd leave her alone. And where did you go? Here, to Aunt Elena's apartment. I have a key. Sophie's voice got smaller. I just wanted to help. Mrs. Patterson absorbed this, her face giving nothing away. Did you consider that leaving school without permission would scare people? That your aunt would be worried? I didn't think about that until after. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry. I messed everything up. You didn't mess everything up, Mrs. Patterson said, surprising everyone. You made a mistake. A serious one, but a mistake nonetheless. The question is, what are we going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again? Elena stepped forward. I've already scheduled an appointment with a child psychologist. Dr. Martinez. She specializes in grief counseling for children. Sophie will be seeing her twice a week. Good. That's good. Mrs. Patterson stood. And what about the school? How are we addressing their concerns? I've spoken with the principal. Sophie will meet with the school counselor once a week, and I've provided documentation about the therapy. They've agreed not to pursue any formal action. Mrs. Patterson made notes on her tablet, and Adrian watched Elena try not to panic. This could go either way. Mrs. Patterson could decide the incident proved Elena wasn't capable of providing stable care, or she could see it for what it was, a scared kid making a bad decision. Ms. Vaughn, Mrs. Patterson said finally, when we first started this evaluation, I had serious concerns about your ability to balance your professional obligations with Sophie's needs. But what I'm seeing now, she gestured around at all of them. This is different. You've built a support system. You're addressing the underlying issues. And Sophie, despite making a very poor choice yesterday, clearly feels safe enough with you to express her fears, even if she does it in ways that aren't productive. Elena's breath caught. Does that mean it means I'm going to recommend continued placement with you, with the understanding that therapy continues and we have monthly check-ins for the next 6 months? Mrs. Patterson looked at Sophie. But young lady, you need to understand something. Running away doesn't solve problems. It creates new ones. If you're scared, you talk to your aunt, or to Adrian, or to a teacher. But you don't leave, understood? Sophie nodded vigorously. I understand. I promise I won't do it again. Good. Mrs. Patterson's expression softened slightly. You're a smart girl, Sophie. Start acting like it. After Mrs. Patterson left, Elena sat down heavily on the couch, her hands shaking. Sophie immediately climbed into her lap, and Elena wrapped her arms around her niece like she was afraid she might disappear. I thought she was going to take you away, Elena whispered into Sophie's hair. I'm sorry. Sophie's voice was muffled against Elena's shoulder. I'm really sorry. I know, baby, I know. Elena pulled back enough to look at Sophie's face. But Mrs. Patterson is right. You can't run when things get scary. You have to talk to me, even if it's hard, especially if it's hard. What if you get mad? Then I get mad. But I don't leave. That's what family means. You stick around even when things are messy. Elena smoothed Sophie's hair back. Can you try to remember that? Sophie nodded, and they sat there for a long moment while Mia hovered uncertainly nearby, not sure if she should leave them alone or join in. Adrian made the decision for her, scooping his daughter up and settling on the other end of the couch. Well, he said, that was terrifying. Elena laughed, the sound verging on hysterical. Understatement of the year. Can we watch the squid documentary again? Mia asked, oblivious to the emotional weight of the last 15 minutes. The part with the giant eyes is my favorite. Mine too, Sophie said, already recovering in the way kids do, bouncing back from trauma like rubber. They put on the documentary for what had to be the 4th time, and the girls settled in to watch. Adrian moved closer to Elena, and she leaned against him, her whole body finally relaxing. We survived, she said quietly. We did. Monday's going to be interesting. The office gossip about us. Whitmore probably plotting his next move. The press getting wind of everything. One crisis at a time, Adrian repeated his mother's words. Today, we just survived a caseworker visit and a playground trip. That's enough. Elena tilted her head to look at him. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just good at prioritizing panic. He kissed her forehead. And right now, my priority is making sure you eat something that isn't ice cream and helping Sophie with whatever homework she inevitably forgot about. I didn't forget, Sophie called from the floor without looking away from the screen. I just haven't done it yet. That's literally the definition of forgetting, Adrian said. No, forgetting is when you don't remember it exists. I remember. I'm just choosing not to do it right now. Mia looked impressed. That's really smart logic. Thank you. It's terrible logic, Elena corrected, but she was smiling. Homework after the documentary. Non-negotiable. Sophie groaned, but didn't argue, and Adrian felt something settle in his chest. This was what the next however many years would look like. Negotiating homework and managing crises and building something that looked like family out of people who'd all been broken in different ways. It wouldn't be smooth, it wouldn't be easy, but it would be theirs. The rest of Sunday passed in a blur of domestic normalcy that felt surreal after the chaos of the previous days. They made dinner together, or rather, Adrian and Elena made dinner while the girls made a mess trying to help. Sophie set the table with the kind of precision that suggested she'd been doing it for years, while Mia arranged napkins in increasingly creative patterns. Over pasta and salad, Sophie announced she'd finished her marine biology research paper. It's about adaptive strategies in deep-sea organisms, she said proudly. I focused on how they survive in environments with extreme pressure and no light. Sounds familiar, Adrian murmured to Elena, who kicked him under the table. Can I read it? Elena asked Sophie. The girl's face lit up. Really? You want to? Of course I want to. You've been working on it for weeks. Elena's voice was soft. I want to know about everything that matters to you. Sophie got up from the table and ran to her room, returning with a notebook covered in careful handwriting and detailed diagrams. Elena read through it while Sophie watched anxiously, and Adrian saw the exact moment Elena realized how brilliant her niece actually was. Sophie, this is... Elena looked up, eyes wide. This is college-level work. How did you... I read a lot, Sophie said, embarrassed. Mom used to take me to the library every Saturday and let me check out as many books as I wanted, so I read everything I could find about deep-sea biology. She never told me you were this advanced. Elena's voice was thick. Claire never... Why didn't she tell me? Sophie shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. She tried, but you were always busy. The words hung in the air, heavy with all the missed moments and lost time. Elena's face crumpled slightly before she got it under control. I'm not busy anymore, she said firmly. Or at least, I'm making time. For this. For you. She held up the notebook. This is incredible, Sophie. I'm so proud of you. Sophie's smile was brighter than Adrian had ever seen it. After dinner, after the girls had fallen asleep in Sophie's room, tangled together like puppies, Elena and Adrian found themselves alone again. The apartment was quiet except for the distant hum of the city, and Elena looked exhausted but content. I miss so much of her life, she said, staring at the closed door to Sophie's room. Claire tried to include me, and I was always working, always had something more important. You can't change that, Adrian said gently. But you're here now. That's what matters. Is it enough? Sophie thinks so, and that kid doesn't lie to make people feel better. He pulled Elena close. You're doing exactly what you need to do, showing up, being present, learning as you go. Elena leaned her head on his shoulder. What about you? How are you processing all this? Your life just got exponentially more complicated because you decided to help me. Adrian thought about it. His carefully controlled existence had been blown apart in the space of a week. His secret trust fund would probably come out soon. His relationship with his boss was now public knowledge, at least among people who'd seen them at the park. And he'd essentially become a co-parent to a 7-year-old he'd barely known a few days ago. Honestly, he said, it's the least complicated I've felt in years. How does that make sense? Because I was pretending before. Pretending the money didn't exist. Pretending I was fine being alone. Pretending I didn't have feelings for you. He tilted her chin up to look at him. This might be messy, but at least it's real. Elena kissed him, and it was different from the first time. Less desperate, more sure. Like they were both finally letting themselves believe this was actually happening. Stay tonight? She asked when they pulled apart. Actually stay, not on the couch. Adrian's heart kicked against his ribs. Elena, I'm not asking for anything we're not ready for. I don't want to sleep alone. Not tonight. But so they ended up in her bedroom, which Adrian had never seen before. It was surprisingly simple. None of the expensive minimalism of the rest of the apartment. Just a bed with soft sheets, a dresser covered in photos of Sophie, and a stack of books on the nightstand that suggested Elena read romance novels when no one was looking. You read romance novels? He said, picking up a paperback with a shirtless man on the cover. Shut up. Elena snatched it away, blushing. They're relaxing. I'm not judging. I'm delighted. Adrian grinned. Does this mean you have expectations about grand gestures? I have expectations about you not mocking my reading choices. They changed, Adrian borrowing clothes that were too small but would work for sleeping, and climbed into bed. Elena curled against him immediately, her hand splayed over his heart. This is nice, she murmured. Yeah, it is. Adrian? Thank you. For everything, for seeing me, for not running, she stopped, for making me believe I deserve this. Adrian kissed the top of her head. You've always deserved it. You just needed to let yourself have it. They fell asleep like that, tangled together, and when Sophie knocked on the door in the morning asking if they wanted pancakes, they were both still smiling. Monday came too fast. Adrian got to the office early, knowing the gossip would already be spreading. He wasn't wrong. He could feel the stares as he walked through the lobby, hear the whispers that stopped when he got close. By the time he reached his desk outside Elena's office, 3 people had already asked him pointed questions about his weekend. He deflected them all with professional courtesy and absolutely no information. Elena arrived at 8:30, looking every inch the CEO again in her armor of expensive clothing and perfect hair. But when she passed his desk, she let her hand brush his shoulder for just a second, a tiny gesture that felt enormous. The morning passed in a blur of meetings and emails. But at noon, Marcus Whitmore requested a private meeting with Elena, and Adrian's stomach dropped. You don't have to see him, Adrian said. Yes, I do. Elena's jaw was set. He's still a board member, and I need to know what he's planning. Then I'm coming with you? Adrian, I'm your executive assistant. I'm supposed to be in meetings with you. Let me do my job. Elena studied him for a moment, then nodded. Okay, but let me handle him. Whitmore was waiting in the small conference room, looking smug in a way that made Adrian want to punch him. He stood when they entered, his smile not reaching his eyes. Elena. Adrian. Thank you for meeting with me. What do you want, Marcus? Elena didn't sit. I assume this isn't a social call. Straight to business. I always appreciated that about you. Whitmore pulled out his phone and showed them a photo. Elena and Adrian at the park, holding hands. This is making the rounds on social media. You and your assistant, looking very close. And? Elena's voice was ice. And it's unprofessional. The CEO of a major corporation having a relationship with a subordinate raises all sorts of questions about judgment and workplace ethics. Then I'll make it simple. Elena didn't even blink. Adrian is stepping down as my executive assistant, effective immediately. Adrian's head whipped around to look at her. They hadn't discussed this. He'll be transitioning to a new role as senior strategic advisor, reporting directly to the board rather than to me. Same salary, better benefits, and no direct reporting relationship to muddy the waters. Elena's smile was sharp. Does that address your concerns about workplace ethics, Marcus? Whitmore's smug expression faltered. You can't just create positions. I can, actually. It's in my contract. I have discretion over senior appointments as long as they're approved by the board, which I'll submit for formal approval at the next meeting. She stepped closer to him. But let's be honest about what this is really about. You don't care about workplace ethics. You care that I'm happy, that I'm building a life outside this office. Because as long as I was miserable and alone, you could tell yourself I was just like you. But I'm not. You're making a mistake, Whitmore said quietly. This company deserves a CEO who's focused, not someone distracted by playing house with an assistant and a kid. Senior Strategic Advisor, Elena corrected. And that kid has a name. Her name is Sophie, and she's the best thing that's ever happened to me. Better than this company, better than your approval,
and definitely better than wasting my time trying to prove myself to someone who will never be satisfied. She turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Marcus, the board voted to keep me. The shareholders are happy with performance. The only person who has a problem with how I run my life is you. So unless you want to spend the rest of your tenure as a board member being increasingly irrelevant, I suggest you find something else to focus on. They left Whitmore sitting in the conference room, his face red with suppressed anger. Adrian waited until they were back in Elena's office with the door closed before speaking. You just promoted me, he said. I did. Elena was pacing, adrenaline clearly still pumping through her. I should have asked first, I'm sorry, but I couldn't let him use our relationship as ammunition, and this way, it's perfect, Adrian interrupted. It's actually perfect. No more reporting relationship, better position, and Whitmore looks like an idiot for trying to make it into a scandal. Elena stopped pacing. You're not mad? Are you kidding? I'm impressed. Adrian crossed to her, catching her hands. That was the most terrifying thing I've ever seen, and I'm a little turned on by it. She laughed, surprised and genuine. You're ridiculous. You like it. I really do. They kissed, and for a moment everything else faded. The office politics, the gossip, the uncertainty of what came next. There was just this. Two people who'd found each other in the wreckage and decided to build something new. Elena's phone rang, interrupting them. She checked the screen and frowned. It's Sophie's school, she said, answering immediately. Hello? Yes, this is Elena Vaughn. Adrian watched her face change as she listened, saw the fear creep back in. I understand, Elena said. I'll be right there. She hung up, and her hands were shaking again. Sophie's having a panic attack, she said. They can't calm her down. They need me to come get her. Adrian was already grabbing his jacket. Let's go. They made it to the school in 15 minutes, breaking at least 3 traffic laws in the process. The principal met them at the entrance, looking harried. She's in the nurse's office, she said. She was fine all morning, and then during recess she started hyperventilating and saying she couldn't breathe. We tried everything, but she keeps asking for you. Elena ran, Adrian following close behind. They found Sophie curled in a chair in the nurse's office, tears streaming down her face, breathing too fast and too shallow. I'm here, Elena said, dropping to her knees in front of Sophie. I'm right here, baby. You left, Sophie gasped between breaths. You went to work, and I thought you weren't coming back. Oh, sweetheart, Elena pulled Sophie into her arms. I always come back, always. Even when I'm at work, even when I'm busy, I always come back. Promise? Sophie's voice was so small, so broken. I promise. On everything I have, I promise. Elena was crying now, too, holding Sophie tight. You're stuck with me, kiddo, for the rest of forever. Slowly, Sophie's breathing evened out. Adrian watched from the doorway as Elena just held her niece, rocking her gently, whispering reassurances that gradually sank in. The nurse had stepped back, giving them space, and the principal was hovering uncertainly nearby. After about 10 minutes, Sophie pulled back, wiping at her face with the sleeve of her uniform. I'm sorry, she said. I ruined everything again. You didn't ruin anything. Elena brushed Sophie's hair back from her face. You had a bad moment. That's allowed. That's normal, even. But you had to leave work, and I'll always leave work if you need me. That's what I've been trying to tell you. You come first now, always. Sophie looked at Adrian, who'd moved closer. What about you? Did I ruin your work too? Nope, I was looking for an excuse to leave anyway. Meetings are boring. He crouched down next to Elena. Besides, someone needs to make sure your aunt doesn't speed on the way home. She drives like she's in a movie chase scene. That got a small smile from Sophie. The principal cleared her throat. Ms. Vaughn, perhaps Sophie should take the rest of the day off. Go home. Decompress. We can arrange for her homework to be sent home. Elena looked at Sophie. What do you think? Do you want to go home? Sophie nodded, still shaky but calmer now. They signed her out and drove back to Elena's apartment in silence. Sophie sat in the back seat holding Elena's hand through the gap between the seats, and Adrian drove carefully, giving them time to just be. Once they were home, Sophie immediately curled up on the couch with her marine biology books. Elena sat next to her, not hovering but present.
Available. Adrian made tea for everyone and brought out the cookies his mother had sent home with them yesterday. Normal, domestic things that helped ground them all. Doctor, Martinez called this morning, Elena said quietly to Adrian while Sophie was absorbed in her reading. She can see Sophie tomorrow afternoon, her first official session. That's good. Fast. I may have mentioned it was urgent and possibly called in a favor. Elena's smile was weak. Turns out having a reputation in business means some people will move mountains for you. Good use of your power. They sat there for the rest of the afternoon, the three of them in Elena's living room, doing nothing particularly important. Sophie read. Elena answered emails on her laptop with one hand, the other resting on Sophie's shoulder. Adrian made calls and rearranged schedules and generally tried to keep the world from intruding too much. It was quiet, peaceful, and for the first time in days, nobody was running from anything. That evening, after Sophie had fallen asleep early, exhausted from the panic attack, Elena and Adrian sat on her balcony watching the city lights. This is our life now, Elena said. Emergency pickups from school and panic attacks and trying to convince a 7-year-old that we're not going to disappear. Yep. You're really okay with that? Because you can still walk away. This isn't legally binding or anything. You could just go back to your normal life. Adrian turned to look at her. Elena, I love you. I love Sophie. This is my normal life now, the only one I want. She stared at him. You said it. Out loud. I love you, he repeated, making sure she heard it. I've probably loved you for a while now, but I'm saying it officially. I love you. All of you, the CEO part and the messy parent part and the part that reads romance novels and pretends not to. Elena's eyes filled with tears. I love you too. I'm terrified and I have no idea what I'm doing, but I love you. They kissed on that balcony while the city sprawled below them, full of millions of people living millions of lives. But in that moment, theirs was the only one that mattered. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more board politics and therapy appointments, and learning how to be a family on the fly. But tonight, they had this, and it was enough. 3 months passed in a blur of therapy appointments and board meetings, and learning how to be a family without a manual. Dr. Martinez turned out to be exactly what Sophie needed, patient, direct, and completely unfazed by a 7-year-old who could explain bioluminescence but couldn't talk about her feelings without shutting down. Slowly, painfully, Sophie started to open up about losing her mother, about her fears of being abandoned, about the nightmares that still woke her up most nights. Elena attended every session, sitting in the waiting room with her laptop, making it clear she wasn't going anywhere. And gradually, the panic attacks became less frequent. The nightmares didn't disappear. But Sophie started coming to Elena's room when they happened, instead of suffering alone in the dark. Adrian's promotion to senior strategic advisor raised eyebrows, but stuck. He was good at the job. Better than good, actually. Turned out years of anticipating Elena's needs translated well into strategic planning and board relations. Marcus Whitmore tried to make noise about nepotism, but the numbers didn't lie. Adrian's recommendations were solid, his insights valuable, and within 6 weeks, even the skeptical board members were listening when he spoke. The gossip about their relationship died down once it became clear they were serious. Not a scandal, not a fling, just 2 people who'd found each other and were building something real. The press tried to make it dramatic, running stories about billionaire CEO's secret romance. But Elena shut that down with a single statement that was professional and final. Her personal life was personal, and anyone who had questions about her job performance could look at the quarterly earnings. The earnings were exceptional. Turned out, Elena with a life outside work was actually more effective than Elena married to the office. She was sharper in meetings, more creative in strategy, more willing to delegate because she had something worth going home to. But it wasn't smooth. Nothing worthwhile ever was. 4 months in, Sophie had a massive meltdown at school when another kid made a comment about her dead mother. She punched him, actually punched him, gave him a bloody nose, and Elena had to leave a critical negotiation to pick her up from the principal's office. I don't regret it, Sophie said in the car, arms crossed, jaw set in that stubborn way that was pure Elena. He said Mom didn't love me because she left me, so I hit him. Elena should have lectured her about violence, should have explained why hitting people was wrong, no matter how cruel they were being, but instead she pulled over in a random parking lot and turned to look at her niece. Your mother loved you more than anything in the world, she said, voice fierce. She loved you so much that when she knew she was dying, the only thing she asked me was to take care of you, not to save her company, not to manage her affairs, just to make sure you were okay. You were her entire world, Sophie. Don't ever let anyone tell you different. Sophie's defiance crumbled, and she started crying, the kind of deep, wrenching sobs that come from a grief too big for a small body to hold. Elena unbuckled both their seatbelts and pulled Sophie into her arms right there in the front seat, holding her while she cried for the mother she'd never get back. They sat in that parking lot for 40 minutes while Sophie grieved. Adrian called twice, and Elena ignored both calls. Work could wait. The negotiation could wait. Right now, this was the only thing that mattered. When Sophie finally cried herself out, Elena handed her tissues and smoothed her hair back. You still shouldn't have hit him, she said gently. Not because he didn't deserve it, but because you're better than that. And because if you get suspended, we can't go to the marine biology exhibit next week like we planned. Sophie hiccuped. Am I suspended? Probably. I'll find out when we go back. Elena cupped Sophie's face. But whatever happens, I'm on your side, always, even when you make mistakes. The school gave Sophie a 2-day suspension and mandatory anger management counseling. Elena took the 2 days off work entirely, didn't work from home, didn't take calls, just spent 48 hours with Sophie doing normal things. They went to the aquarium. They made cookies that burned on the bottom. They watched every deep-sea documentary they could find and argued about whether the giant squid or the colossal squid would win in a fight. It was the best 2 days Elena could remember having in years. Adrian came over both evenings, bringing Mia with him. The girls had become inseparable. Sophie, the serious older sister. Mia, the chaotic younger one who somehow balanced each other perfectly. They built blanket forts and put on terrible plays about ocean creatures and drove the adults crazy with their constant energy. This is my life now, Adrian said one evening, watching Mia try to convince Sophie that dolphins were basically water puppies, negotiating merger deals, and attending elementary school plays. Having regrets? Elena asked, leaning against him on the couch. Not even a little bit. He kissed her temple. Though I am wondering when we're going to have the conversation about moving in together. Elena went still. What? We're together most nights anyway. Either I'm here or you're at my place. And we're shuttling the girls back and forth like we're running a very inefficient carpool service. Adrian kept his tone light, but she could hear the seriousness underneath. It seems practical to just make it official. Practical, Lena repeated. Okay, not just practical. I want to wake up with you every morning. I want Sophie to have a stable home with both of us in it. I want Mia to have a sister who teaches her about marine biology instead of just letting her watch cartoon sharks. He turned to look at her. I want us to be a family, a real one, not just people who love each other but live in separate apartments. Elena's heart was racing. That's a big step. I know. Sophie's just starting to feel stable. What if we mess that up? What if moving too fast scares her? What if not moving scares her more, Adrian countered. She already thinks of my place as a second home. She has a toothbrush in our bathroom and books on the shelf. We're not rushing into anything. We're just acknowledging what's already happening. Elena looked at the girls, who were now attempting to build a coral reef out of couch cushions. Sophie was explaining something about symbiotic relationships while Mia nodded seriously, understanding maybe half of it. We should ask Sophie, Elena said quietly. See how she feels about it. Okay. They waited until that weekend, after a Saturday morning breakfast that had become their routine. Mia was at Rose's house for the day, leaving Sophie alone with Elena and Adrian. The kid immediately sensed something was up. You're both being weird, she announced, pushing her pancakes around her plate. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, Elena said. We wanted to talk to you about something. Something important. Sophie put down her fork, her expression guarded. Is this about the suspension? Because I already said I was sorry. It's not about that. Adrian pulled his chair closer. It's about all of us, our family. We're thinking about moving in together, Elena said, deciding direct was better than dancing around it. Adrian and Mia and us, all in one place, but we wanted to know how you felt about that first. Sophie was quiet for a long moment, her face unreadable. Then, where would we live? We haven't decided yet. Maybe a new place that's ours, all of ours, big enough for everyone. Elena reached for Sophie's hand. But only if you're comfortable with it. This is your home too. You get a vote.
What if it doesn't work? Sophie's voice was small. What if you and Adrian fight and break up, and then everything falls apart again? Adrian leaned forward. Sophie, I can't promise Elena and I will never fight. We're human. We'll definitely fight sometimes. But I can promise that I'm committed to this. To your aunt, to you, to making this family work. I'm not going anywhere. That's what Dad said. Sophie pulled her hand back from Elena's. And then he left. And Mom said she'd always be there. And then she died. Everyone says they're not leaving, but they do anyway. Elena felt the words hit like a physical blow. Because Sophie was right. Promises didn't mean much when life kept proving them wrong. You're right, Elena said softly. I can't guarantee that something terrible won't happen. I can't promise I won't get sick, or Adrian won't change his mind, or the world won't find some other way to be cruel. But I can promise that I will fight with everything I have to be here for you, every single day, even when it's hard, even when you're difficult, which you sometimes are. I'm not difficult, Sophie protested, but she was almost smiling. You punched a kid last week. He deserved it. Probably, Elena smiled. But my point is, I'm choosing to stay. Every single day, I'm choosing you. And so is Adrian. And that choice doesn't go away just because we all live under the same roof. If anything, it makes it stronger. Sophie looked at Adrian. Do you really want me there? Because I'm not like Mia. I'm quiet and weird, and I like reading more than playing. Sophie, you're exactly what this family needs. Adrian's voice was steady. Mia needs someone to teach her that books are magic. I need someone who'll call me out when I'm being stupid about business stuff. And your aunt needs someone who'll remind her that being smart and being weird are the same thing. I'm not weird, Elena said. You alphabetize your spice rack, Sophie said. That's just organized. It's weird, but good weird. Sophie took a deep breath. Okay, we can try it. But if it gets bad, if you start fighting all the time, or if Mia gets annoying, then we'll deal with it, Elena finished. As a family, together. They found a house 3 weeks later, a brownstone in Brooklyn, with enough bedrooms for everyone to have space and a backyard that Mia immediately claimed for dinosaur excavations. It was expensive and needed work, and was absolutely perfect. Moving day was chaos. Rose showed up with food and opinions about furniture placement. The girls ran through empty rooms, making echo sounds. Adrian's trust fund finally came out when someone from the real estate office made a comment about how he could afford the down payment on his salary, and Elena just looked at him with raised eyebrows. We're going to talk about this later, she said. I know. You've been secretly wealthy this entire time. Technically, yes. And you worked as my assistant for 3 years making a normal salary when you could have... She stopped. Why? Adrian set down the box he was carrying. Because the money was never mine. Not really. It was my grandfather's legacy, and I watched it destroy my father. So I walked away from it, built my own life. But lately I've been thinking maybe the money isn't good or bad. Maybe it's just a tool. And if I can use it to help build this... He gestured around at the house, at Sophie and Mia playing in the next room. Then maybe it's worth keeping. Elena processed this, her expression shifting through several emotions before landing on something that looked like understanding. We're still talking about it later, she said. But for now, help me figure out where the couch goes. They spent 6 weeks turning the house into a home. Sophie got the room with the best light for reading, and they filled it with bookshelves and a desk for her marine biology research. Mia's room became a dinosaur museum, complete with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling that Adrian spent 3 hours putting up. The master bedroom was simple but comfortable, and for the first time in her life, Elena let someone else share her space permanently. The adjustment was harder than any of them expected. Sophie had meltdowns about her routine being disrupted. Mia went through a phase of having accidents because she couldn't remember which bathroom was hers. Elena and Adrian had their first real fight about parenting decisions. Specifically, whether Sophie should be allowed to skip a birthday party to work on her research paper. She needs social interaction with kids her age, Adrian said. She needs to do things she's actually interested in, not force herself to be someone she's not, Elena countered. She's 7.
She should be playing with other 7-year-olds, not writing college-level papers, says the man who works with billionaires but pretended to be broke for 3 years. The fight escalated from there, both of them saying things they didn't mean, until Sophie appeared in the doorway in her pajamas, looking terrified. "Are you getting divorced?" she asked, tears already forming. "We're not married, sweetie," Elena said automatically, then realized that wasn't the point. "And no, we're arguing. That's allowed in families. But Dad and Mom used to argue, and then Dad left. I'm not leaving." Adrian crossed to Sophie, kneeling down to her level. "Your aunt and I disagree about some things. That's normal. That's healthy, even. But we're going to work it out, and tomorrow we're still going to be here. Both of us." Sophie looked between them, searching for the lie. When she didn't find it, she nodded slowly and went back to bed. After she left, Elena and Adrian looked at each other. "We can't do that," Elena said quietly. "Fight where she can hear us. Not when she's already so scared of people leaving." "Agreed." Adrian rubbed his face. "And for the record, you're right about the party. If Sophie doesn't want to go, we shouldn't force her." "You're right about the social interaction, though. Maybe we can find her a club or something. Other kids who like marine biology." They compromised, like adults in functioning relationships do. Sophie skipped the party but joined an aquarium youth program where she met other ocean-obsessed kids. She was still quiet and serious, but she came home talking about a girl named Zara who wanted to study whale communication, and Elena counted that as a win. 6 months into living together, they'd found a rhythm, chaotic and imperfect, but theirs. Elena still worked too much sometimes, but she was home for dinner most nights. Adrian balanced his strategic advisory work with being the parent who handled school pickups and homework help. The girls fought like siblings and loved like siblings, and slowly, the house started to feel like more than just a building. They were building something, a family that didn't look like anyone else's, but worked for them. It was 8 months after they'd moved in together when Adrian decided he was ready to make it permanent. He talked to Rose first, then to Sophie and Mia, wanting their blessing before he did anything. Both girls were enthusiastic. Mia immediately started planning a princess wedding, while Sophie suggested they get married at the aquarium. "I'm not getting married at the aquarium," Adrian said. "Why not? It's romantic. There are sharks." "That's not as compelling an argument as you think it is." He bought a ring, something simple and elegant that looked like Elena, not like an ostentatious display of wealth. And then he waited for the right moment, which turned out to be harder than expected. Every time he planned something romantic, life intervened. Sophie got sick, a crisis at work. Mia had a school performance they couldn't miss. Finally, he stopped trying to plan it and just let it happen. It was a random Sunday evening in October. They'd spent the day at the park. Both girls, both adults, just being a family. Sophie had brought a book about deep-sea trenches and spent most of the afternoon reading under a tree while Mia tried to dig to China in the sandbox. Elena had brought work, but ended up abandoning it to push Mia on the swings while Adrian talked to Sophie about her upcoming science fair project. Normal. Ordinary. Perfect. They came home as the sun was setting, the girls running ahead while Adrian and Elena walked slower, hands linked, comfortable in the silence. "I love this," Elena said suddenly. "This life. This family. I didn't know I could have this." And Adrian thought, this is it. This is the moment. He stopped walking, pulling Elena to a halt next to him. The girls were at the front door, arguing about whose turn it was to pick the movie. The autumn air was cool, the sky turning pink and gold. "Elena," he said. She turned, and something in his expression made her go still. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Nothing's wrong." He pulled the ring box from his pocket, and her eyes went wide. "Everything is actually really, really right. Adrian, I know we haven't been together that long. I know we're still figuring things out, and we fight sometimes, and we're probably going to mess up 100 more times before we get this whole family thing right." He opened the box, and the ring caught the light. "But I also know that I want to keep messing up with you. I want to keep building this life we're creating, and I want to make it official, not just for us, but for Sophie and Mia. I want us to be a real family, legally and officially, and in every way that matters." Elena was crying, one hand pressed to her mouth. So Elena Vaughn, brilliant CEO, terrible at cooking, the best mother Sophie could ask for, even though you're still learning. Will you marry me? For a long moment, she just stared at him. Then she laughed through her tears. Yes, she said. Yes, obviously yes. He slipped the ring on her finger, and she kissed him right there on the sidewalk, while the sunset painted the sky behind them. When they pulled apart, they realized Sophie and Mia had abandoned the front door and were standing on the porch watching. Finally, Mia yelled. I've been keeping this secret for weeks. You knew? Elena looked at Adrian. I asked their permission first. Seemed important. He grinned. Sophie suggested the aquarium again, by the way. We're not getting married at the aquarium, Elena said. But she was laughing, and Sophie and Mia were running toward them, and suddenly all four of them were hugging on the sidewalk while the neighbors probably watched from their windows. This was their family, messy and weird and built from broken pieces, but whole in all the ways that mattered. The wedding happened 3 months later, and they compromised. Not the aquarium, but a venue with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean. Small and intimate, just close friends and family. Rose cried through the entire ceremony. Sophie and Mia were flower girls and took the job incredibly seriously, throwing petals with the kind of precision usually reserved for scientific experiments. Elena wore a simple dress that cost more than most people's cars but looked perfect on her. Adrian wore a suit and the smile of a man who couldn't believe he'd gotten this lucky. They wrote their own vows, and when Elena promised to always come home, always choose Sophie, always build this family they'd created, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. The reception was chaotic and perfect. Mia gave a speech that was mostly about dinosaurs, but ended with her being happy to have Sophie as a sister forever. Sophie's speech was quieter, more serious, thanking Elena for keeping her promises, and Adrian for teaching her that families could be chosen, not just given. You didn't have to love me, Sophie said, looking at Adrian. I'm not your daughter, but you chose to anyway, and that means more than you know. Adrian couldn't speak for a solid minute after that, too choked up to form words. They danced until late, the four of them, Elena and Adrian's first dance as husband and wife, then both girls cutting in. And eventually it was just the four of them swaying together while the music played and the ocean crashed beyond the windows. This was what they'd built from the wreckage of loss and loneliness and fear. A family that didn't look like anyone else's, but worked perfectly for them. Sophie still had nightmares sometimes, but she had people to wake up when they came. Elena still worked too hard occasionally, but she had a husband who called her out and a daughter who reminded her what mattered. Adrian still worried about money and legacy and whether he was good enough, but he had a wife who loved him and 2 girls who thought he hung the moon. They weren't perfect. They fought and made mistakes and messed up regularly, but they showed up for each other. Every single day, they chose to stay. 3 years after the wedding, Sophie was 10 and presenting her marine biology research at a youth science conference. She'd grown taller, more confident, though she was still serious and book-obsessed and absolutely determined to study deep-sea creatures for the rest of her life. Elena and Adrian sat in the audience with Mia between them, watching Sophie explain adaptive mechanisms in extreme environments to a room full of adults who looked genuinely impressed. When she finished, the applause was thunderous, and Sophie smiled, really smiled, bright and genuine and proud of herself. That's my sister, Mia whispered, loud enough for the whole row to hear. She's going to be a famous scientist. Probably, Elena agreed, reaching for Adrian's hand. After the presentation, they took the girls out for ice cream, a tradition that had started years ago and stuck. Sophie got mint chocolate chip because it was scientifically the best flavor. Mia got rainbow because it had the most colors. They sat outside the shop while the girls debated whether giant squids or sperm whales were cooler, and Elena leaned her head on Adrian's shoulder. We did good, she said quietly. We did great, Adrian corrected. Look at them. Sophie was laughing at something Mia said, her face animated and open in a way it never used to be. Mia was gesturing wildly, her dinosaur obsession having evolved into a general love of all prehistoric creatures, which meant she and Sophie actually had things to talk about now. You know what the best part is? Elena said. We get to keep doing this, every day, for the rest of our lives. Sounds perfect to me. They finished their ice cream and drove home together, the four of them, to the house that had become theirs. Sophie immediately disappeared into her room to work on her next research project. Mia demanded help building a model volcano for school. Elena and Adrian worked together in the kitchen, making dinner, navigating around each other with the ease of people who'd learned each other's rhythms. Later, after the girls were in bed and the house was quiet, Elena and Adrian sat on their back porch, watching the stars. "Sometimes I think about that night," Elena said. "When you heard me on the phone with the caseworker, when everything started." "Best night of my life," Adrian said. "I was falling apart." "You were being human." He pulled her closer. "And you let me in. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen." Elena was quiet for a moment, thinking about the woman she'd been 3 years ago, terrified and alone and convinced she had to carry everything herself. That woman felt like a stranger now. "I'm glad you didn't walk away," she said finally. "When you could have. When it would have been easier. Walking away from you has never been an option." Adrian kissed her temple. "You're stuck with me." "Good. Because I'm not letting you go." They sat there in the quiet of their backyard, in the house they'd built together, with the family they'd chosen, and felt the weight of gratitude for the life they'd created. It hadn't been easy. It hadn't been smooth. But it had been worth every difficult moment, every fear overcome. Every choice to stay when leaving would have been simpler. Inside, Sophie's light was still on, probably reading one more chapter before she slept. Mia's room was dark, except for the glow-in-the-dark stars Adrian had put up years ago, still shining. This was their family, built from broken pieces and held together by stubborn love and the simple promise to show up every single day, no matter what. And in the end, that promise was everything.